ministra funduszy i polityki.
Katarzyna Pełczyńska-Nałęcz, Minister of Development Funds and Regional Policy. Ladies and gentlemen, dear guests, I wish to welcome all of you, ladies and gentlemen, at our conference, The European Way of Growth, a growth policy for a secure, resilient, and globally competitive European Union. I wish to welcome most cordially the Speaker of the Polish Parliament, Szymon Hołownia. I wish to welcome Vice President of the European Commission for Employment, Social Affairs and Equal Opportunities, Roxana Mizatin. I welcome Vice President of the European Commission for Cohesion and Reforms, Rafael Fito. I welcome Jonas Maria, Vice President of the European Parliament, Krzysztof Klench, the Voivode of the Krakow region, Małopolskie. I welcome the Mayor of the city of Krakow, Aleksander Miszalski, members of the European Parliament, representatives of European institutions, representatives of member states, local government, and experts. Most cordially welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It is my great honor to give the floor to the first speaker, Mr. Hołownia, the Speaker of the Polish Sejm.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear guests, I will be delivering my speech in my mother tongue, in Polish, but I will take this chance to greet our guests from European Commission, from other European institutions. My dear friend Tony Murphy from European Court of Auditors is here, but I think that the vast majority of our listeners, of our audience here are Polish, are from here, want to listen what does development, what does resilience mean here in Poland, in Europe these days. So I'll be switching in English later on, but right now I will start in Polish because Polish is my mother tongue. I'm proud that I'm Polish. And this is the very start of what I wanted to tell you, because I will start with identity, my personal identity, because, and now I will switch to Polish, czuję się
Well, I feel someone coming from the Podlasie region, from Poland and from Europe. This is my identity. From this perspective, I would like to speak about all the different issues that we're going to discuss here in Krakow. Development, resilience, all the challenges facing us in Europe. Why those three perspectives? Well, first of all, as a man from Podlasie region, eastern Poland, I was born in Białystok, northern eastern Poland. I come from a border region. My roots reach far to the east, across the border. My ancestors used to live and work in St. Petersburg, in Lviv, in Vilnius, there in the Kresy, the borderlands, as we call them in Poland. We are just locals, people from there, or from here, from that perspective. Podlasia region shows to us the scale of new challenges that we are all facing today. The simple geographical truth defines it very clearly. The Podlaskie region and Warmińsko-Mazurskie, another region in the north and northern eastern part of Poland, we have more than 1,200, or more than 120 kilometers of border with the Russian Federation, then with Belarus. Belarus that can be considered today just a colony of Russia. So our values, what we have always believed in, this is where our values are questioned on an everyday basis by Putin, by the dictator of Minsk. This loud cry that is so important for us within the presidency now, safety Europe. This is where we can hear those words very clearly. I invite you to visit Eastern Poland, speak to people who have great fears. They are truly wondering whether perhaps they are yet another generation that is going to experience war. So yes, certainly, security does not exclude humanity, being human. We as a proud nation that this is where the idea of solidarity originated and was later passed on to others around the world. We should certainly not fear, and we should not pretend that there are no threats from the outside, from the right extreme views, those that instead of solidarity try to offer xenophobia. Safety certainly does not exclude humanity, but security certainly has to be our priority. As a man of Podlasie, these are my words. And as a Pole now, I am very much proud of the way our country develops, the excellent way in which we are investing European funds. Yes, Poland certainly is a good example of how European funds can be invested in a very sensible way. It changes the world. They change our country. They change the whole of Europe. We in Poland, we have no longer any complexes. We used to have still some time ago. We don't want to say that we want to be a second Canada, second Japan or Korea. We want to be simply Poland, the first Poland, Poland whose development will be perhaps copied by others, and others hopefully will say one day we will become another second Poland. One day we will catch up with Poland, perhaps. This is what others certainly are going to mention more and more. And now as a European, I feel great respect for all the different values of the EU, the Christian heritage of the EU and the whole continent. I know that just like we in Poland, in Europe, we don't have to copy solutions of other countries. The European Union certainly does not need to copy 100% US solutions.
Great again, because Europe is already great. Europa już jest wielka, dumna.
Europe already now is great. It's proud, it's unique. As for the quality of life, certainly we are more advanced than the United States of America. The quality of life we have created here for our citizens in Europe. Europe is proud, Europe is brave, but at the same time we are facing colossal challenges. Courageous decisions are needed at the same time, an honest diagnosis coming before is needed. It's not only my feeling, in my view. The European Union, instead of moving along a road of strategic planning, creating reality, moved to the side as not responsive as it could be. We are trying to catch up, or we are trying to, within the EU, to react to crises, a series of crises. But we do not show others a certain vision. We do not lead, perhaps, as we used to. It's no longer a place, perhaps, that is considered a leader in this competition. And this, in my view, needs to be changed.
And it has to be changed during our watch, while we fulfill the functions we do that were entrusted to us by the people. This is the time, this is the window. There's going to be no other. We're losing the distance, and you know about it well, to the United States, to China. When my Poland was joining the European Union, we aspired to the name of the largest economy of the world. Now we've agreed to the second place in the world, and China is going to overtake us. What are we doing about that? In the last decade, we wanted to define principles according to which this world of us should follow. The problem is that the world rejects those principles. EU emits but 8% of the world's greenhouse gases. The brutal truth is that even a zero-emissions EU will not stop the global disaster, climate disaster, and someone must say it openly, with courage. Moreover, the green and just transformation does not seem just to many, hence a problem with the word green. Green, if you ask people in many places, not only of Poland, but throughout Europe, brings bad connotations, while it had fantastic connotations. It brings injustice into your mind, the union of directives and files. The path to competition cannot lead through the poverty of the most impoverished. And they are the most impoverished who today use diesel engines in their cars and live in those parts of Europe where there is no well-developed public transport. We don't invest enough, we regulate too much. All the time, this is too much the Europe of directives and files, rather than a vision that would attract us, that we would like to follow, that we believe in. European societies in the last years have lived through 5 huge crises, 5 huge plagues. They used to be once in a generation, and now all the 5 came during the life of one generation. The migration crisis, economic crisis, climate crisis, the crisis in the wake of COVID-19, they all came simultaneously. And out of 5 crises, out of the 5 riders of apocalypse, we must have 4 great answers. We must be prepared for them. We must implement those changes into our lives as quickly as possible. Then there will be an opportunity for Europe to believe in it again, that people living here will believe in Europe, and that the world will again believe into the European project. The well-being, justice, and first of all, just development. The first recipe are investments. First, investments. Richness, wealth does not come from keeping your money hidden under your bed. Mario Draghi was right to write in his report, for competition we must invest into ourselves. 800 billion euro more than we used to, than we invested in the past. We need that money to be able to give power to European economy so that European companies could develop in the world. Today, 4 out of the largest 50 techs, global techs, are EU techs. This has to change. 800 billion euro. This is investment into security and into wealth, into European data being kept on European servers, so that future emanations of artificial intelligence don't only come from California, Hangzhou, and Shanghai, but that they are developed by companies from Małopolska, Catalonia, Alsace. You know what is the scale of a problem we're standing up to in our labor market, which is going to be diminishing. By 2040, we will be losing 2 million people a year. That is a challenge, and you know perfectly well that today, out of 75 billion euro that more or less is spent by European armies for the purchase of modern armaments technologies, 78% is spent outside the European Union, outside the EU economy. Of that, 63% in the United States. 75 billion euro that could be building our own potential. You know well how very much the development of the internet depended on the investments into connectivity that the military did. Military technologies always develop medicine, connectivity, transmission, things we need in life. Have we given up fully? Will we always be just a client with a full wallet going to purchase from the richer, the faster, the better than we are? Or perhaps we can't really afford it. Let's follow the example of those from whom we buy technology. They don't have 12 types of tanks they use as the European states, but one, like the United States. These are the challenges that if we now drown in the following sessions and European bureaucracy, we will have overlooked the time for investment, our time. Investments so that we let ourselves make money, that we give an opportunity to ourselves to stop being the world's largest client, to have others coming to us buying the things that we have produced. Being a client, we are the best. In marketing of being a client, we are the best. The problem is behind the doors, what the production is. This is where the problem lies. That's not going to change without investments. Then cheap energy, that's the second recipe to this cumulated crisis I've described in the first words. Today, and you know very well about it, energy in Europe is 5 times as expensive as in the United States, and 3 times as expensive as in China. Now tell me, how could things be good if everything today needs energy? Starting with cars to the AI, with our life somewhere in the middle. How can we remain competitive? And now we intend to make more payments. Emissions in transport, heating homes with gas in 2027. Here we must be clear. The idea and the pace of that reform that we technically call ETS2 is a proof for insufficient sensitivity of the European Union to the perspective of such countries as, let's take Poland for one. These solutions may be accepted in the rich states that have gone through a different road, urbanized, electricized. But for Poland, for Czechia, they are absolutely premature and they are absolutely too radical. Has anyone ever considered that introduction of ETS2 will increase the competitive edge of our companies, will let us invest more into what I've just mentioned? For years, the EU funds were used to pay people to shift from coal to gas. And if people now hear about the new fees that will be entailed by their transfer to gas, whether their trust to the European Union will rise or drop. For that reason, the security of Europe, which is based on the goodwill of people who want to be in this Europe, will it rise or will it drop? That's it. Here we see another flaw and a challenge that European politicians face. They must be territorial. What looks great on a desk in Brussels has to finish well in Kowalski, Nowak or Smith home in Frankfurt, Aleksandrów, Kujawski, in Małopolska or in Podlasie regions. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense. Otherwise, it serves breaking up the union. It serves the evil that wants to break this world into parts. Evil usually has beautiful faces, usually nicely made up, but it brings xenophobia, evil, divisions. Green transformation must be brought in through incentives, not orders and bans. We know it well in Poland. That's why there are new programs, expanding thermal modernization programs, purchase of electric cars. But please, let's postpone ETS2 by 2, 3, 4 years, and let's consider how to make a truly green Europe, but in a way that will be acceptable by Europeans and for the sake of competitive edge of our companies. They won't be competitive if our energy is 3 or 5 times more expensive compared to the US or China. Thirdly, security. Globalization has gone through. And today we've got to stand up and defend our security and our market. We've got to change the principles along which we invest our joint money, European money. There is no reason that we don't develop the European defense industry for our own money. There is no reason for that for European money we wouldn't be able to develop nuclear energy if this energy makes us realistically independent on Russia and other third parties that can influence the prices of energy. You may remember it in 1970 when OPEC ceased mining, the global economy fell into profound turbulence. The center of steering our life cannot be anywhere beyond our hands. That's the tale of our identity today. The identity we carry to all the identity politicians who say identity is the most important. Yes, it is the most important. Only that they give us a choice between the identity of a Pole and identity of a European. And I say no. My identity is Podlasie, Poland and Europe. And you can meld those harmoniously. We need barriers, trade barriers that will protect us from being overflown by the goods that we don't need and we don't want in Europe. And we must say it clearly. We have the right to self-defense. We have the right to decide about how the European market will be protected against those who want to destroy it, who want to unbalance it. Europe must finally understand that its borders are not ending at the Odra. The borders are on the Bug River. It's a bit further, isn't it? And finally, see and also recognize and respect the Polish model of development and Polish perspective, just like we respect the French and the Dutch. Fourthly, Europeanness. It is very important because I believe that for years we have cultivated a quite perverse understanding of multiculturality until we have reached the moment when many Europeans say it loud and openly, and some people really prey on that. Multiculturalism is no terror of inclusivity at any price. Europe has beautiful and proud tradition of values and should defend them. From those who want to live under our roof, we have the right to demand that they respect our customs. We may not give up our identity so that others feel comfortably. Never will we agree in Europe for underage children marrying, the dramatic inequalities between women and men. It's not ours. It's alien to our culture, to our sensitivity, to our values. The West is not a place in the world. It's a set of values which results from our history and from our tradition. The model of our development, whatever we do, funds, decisions, political or others, at the European level, all that is to result from our values. It is to mirror those values. If we deny those values, we lose our waypoint. We won't know where to go. We will make it to a political roundabout and we'll be just going in circles there for decades. And for the following terms of ours and your parliaments. Others at the time will be taking a ride on. Poland has gone through the experience of two totalitarian regimes that wanted to put an end to our existence. And certainly will not opt for a world in which another totalitarianism counts. The totalitarianism of the power stemming from wealth. Today we see what's happening all around the world. The rich, without any democratic control, without any checks and balances, seize power, political power, and they become ever richer. at the cost, at the expense of the rest of citizens. That's the American model personified today in Elon Musk. Are these truly our European values? Do we really want to be absolutely defenseless in the face of that? To accept that this is the natura rerum. It has happened. European Union, wake up finally. Wake up and understand that today there's time for action and not only for waiting until somebody else has taken action. Let us defend what we have worked out. Let's be able to tell this tale in such a way that it becomes more attractive for the people, because it would speak about well-being and security. So that is more powerful than the fear that they want to instill into us, that's used as a tool of manipulation by the powers that be of this world. Freedom, solidarity and dignity are the European values that stem from our Christian tradition. The values that I profess, these are the values that make us independent of us being or not being Christians today. They make us Europeans. Europe, if it is to be growing, has to be the place that will always, through showing these values, attracted people from all the corners of the world. Those people sought for a place to live, good place to live. They have come here not only for welfare, they also came here for a particular ecosystem we successfully created in Europe, for safety and security, respect, decent law. We cannot abdicate from that. We've got to promote those values, we've got to protect those values, never hide them. We should found on them the investment policy, security policy, developmental policy for Europe, for Poland, for my Białystok. Investments, energy, security, Europeanness. They are the four lodestars for the competitive and proud Poland, for the European Union that deeply and profoundly believes in it, and that I believe will be the world's largest economy. And now, absolutely finishing.
Please allow me, ladies and gentlemen, to share with you the reflection that, well, can be made by someone who is searching wherever possible ways to find agreement with others. As Member of Parliament, as Marshal Speaker of the Polish Parliament, responsible for organizing meetings, events where thoughts are exchanged, often with my perhaps opposite numbers from many European countries. We'll quite soon have another meeting in Tartu in Estonia. The Baltic, Finnish, Ukrainian format will be applied. I was one of the co-funders, and I take good care of its development. Do you know where we actually got it wrong? The biggest mistake was where we started to believe in this very place, sitting in front of our television sets, listening to the members of our parliament speaking, looking at public opinion surveys. It's there that we got it wrong. We came to believe that fear is a merchandise that is better, that sells better than hope. This was the beginning of our end. If we are not able to stop that, we are certainly going to experience the end. But today still we can change everything. We can reverse the flow of history. We have allowed those who sell fear blackmail us. They today are those that we are trying to catch up with, to compete, being more and more radical, or showing that we are less human. Speaking about fear of others, they seem to be winning. That's why we are trying to copy them, trying to become similar to those people. But we're not going to catch up with those who trade in fear. We should remember what is the merchandise that we want to offer to the world. It is hope. If you want to, you can base it on Christian values at the foundation of the EU. But if you want to, you can certainly find other sources of hope. It does not matter. But hope is something that we all humans share, something important for each human individual. seeing new life born into this world, and also those who experience hopelessness. Everyone seems to be searching for hope. When will you understand Europe better than hope sells better than fear? You should stop shaking from fear, fearing new and other clones of extremisms, new growing extremism in Europe. Tadeusz Kościuszko, our great Polish hero, also at the same time national hero of the United States, the hero of the two states, the author of or the leader of a very special insurgents in Poland in the 18th century, fighting for our Polish freedom. A visionary, Kościuszko, used to say, the beginning of the victory is to know what your strength is. That's it. This is the most important task that is going to be the key to renew Europe, to rebuild in us our faith in ourselves, that we shall not yield to fear. We will not let others move faster than we can, develop faster, that we can build together, being yet another generation that constructs the future of Europe. The others will perhaps need to come up to us, knock at our door, asking for cooperation, for support, so that the others may also perhaps be filled, not with fear, but hope.
Sentence you will remember from these 30 minutes of me staying here, saying obvious things, and most of them you know better than I do. Please remember, hope always sells better than fear. So don't be afraid. Don't be afraid, and give people hope, because they are waiting for it. They are waiting for it everywhere, in Poland, in every village, in your countries, in every part of Europe, everywhere. People don't want to be scared. People want to meet someone who will show them the way, show them light, show them hope. Europe is about hope. Europe is hope. Bardzo was proszę, żeby...
I ask you, ladies and gentlemen, it's time to believe in that.
Bardzo dziękujemy za ten...
Thank you very much for this keynote lecture, Mr. Marshall.
Jeszcze raz witamy Państwa.
Yet again, I would like to welcome all of you, ladies and gentlemen, at the conference European Way of Growth Policy for a Secure, Resilient and Globally Competitive European Union, held within the Polish presidency in the Council. Ladies and gentlemen, yes, please take your seats. It has been an excellent introduction, but if there is still someone standing near the doorways, please join us and take your seats in the audience. Referring to the words of Mr. Speaker, I have to admit to something. I'm not sure. Probably never before, when sipping coffee for pleasure, never before did I actually listen to the broadcast of the Polish Parliament live. It happened, it changed actually when Mr. Hołownia became the Marshal, the Speaker of the Polish Sejm, lower chamber of the Parliament. He changed actually the way in which the debates were run. An excellent, interesting, open, friendly way of leading the debates. This has changed very much thanks to Mr. Hołownia. I think that meetings like this are very much about working together, as we want to work together certainly, and we want to cooperate well today and tomorrow. I have prepared for you a very short psychological exercise that is going to help us perhaps understand what kind of cooperation, what kind of working together we need here. I'm asking you to be active. No need to get up. 3 steps. Let me explain them, and then I will ask you to repeat. Okay? So step 1. Please, when I say start, not yet, but first look left, then look right, and look at the people sitting next to you. Start now. Please look left and right. Excellent. So now you know who's sitting next to you. I promised it was not going to be too difficult. Now it's going to be more difficult. Step 2, certainly more complicated. I very often, at conferences, I call it an encouraging look. No need to get worried. Try to look at others in an encouraging way, encouraging to work together. I will show you what it's like. Well, I will try at least. What is an encouraging look? Something like that. Well, certainly you know how to do it best. So let us put 1 and 2 together. So step 1 and 2. Look left and right and look at your neighbors in an encouraging way. Start now.
Bardzo ładnie.
Excellent. I can see that row number 1 especially seems to be doing very well. Thank you. And step 3 now, even more complicated, and we'll try to put all steps together. So looking left and right, plus an encouraging look, plus at the end a smile, a sincere smile, as sincere as possible today in the morning. Start now with a smile.
No i pięknie.
Excellent. Well done. You are ready now. Be careful using this tool. It's a very strong tool, so if you want to be careful, especially during evening receptions, but during the day at different panels, I think it's going to be very useful. I'm Marcin Mańka. Good morning again. I will be moderating the main events here for you today and tomorrow, and hopefully we're going to have not only interesting, fruitful discussions, but also very concrete, positive results will come out of that, as Mr. Marshall also mentioned before. I will a bit later still say more about our agenda, a number of interesting events here. But as you know, we are starting with the introductory words of the European Commission representatives of the EU, also Poland and the city of Krakow. Can I give the floor again to the Minister of Development Funds and Regional Policy, Minister Katarzyna Pałczyńska-Nałęcz. The floor is yours. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to use this word. It was a very inspiring, very moving introductory speech by Marshal Hołownia after the exercise that we were just encouraged to make here. Well, to have hope and to smile. Thank you for bringing this up. Smile at people right next to you. After this introduction, I would like to speak about solutions. We have a number of different challenges facing us, and some of them have been discussed by the Marshal of the Polish Sejm. This event here today, this conference, is very much about challenges, but even more, it's about solutions. We want to speak about those solutions. We want to create those solutions together and then implement them. So it's not about words only, it's very much about action. Today, words are needed so that they can be translated into action. Action then bring about tangible results that can be fast, that can be efficient. If you allow me, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to present to you scenarios for 2 different European Unions. The first European Union is a union that moves on along the same ruts that has been following today, a union of stagnation. This is the scenario in which we choose that we are going to keep roughly the same level of EU funds, maybe go down the level of funds available for the cohesion policy. This would mean that actually we would have fewer investments possible in the future. This is the European Union that would be investing totally about 1% of the GDP, while the big players, other players, whether we speak about our allies as the United States or the competitors, main opponents, as China, for instance, they invest even 5 times more. This is the union that is changing into a place that is very much dependent on others, where we drive our electric cars, but cars that are not made in the EU, where we store our data on servers that are located outside the territory of the European Union. And more, my country, my homeland, Poland, but also other European homelands, the citizens, men and women, they are more and more dependent on the technologies they use, technologies that were not created, not made in the EU. And these are the technologies that do not make it possible to generate profit for our European companies. It would be different, of course, if we were to create those solutions, manufacture those products here in the EU, making it possible for our businesses to make profit on them. And hopefully others around the world would be using those products, innovations in other parts of the world. So this is the first scenario of a possible European Union of the future. And now another scenario, the second one for the European Union that chooses to, I remember this word, especially from the keynote speech, hope and courageous change. This is the European Union that mobilizes hundreds of billions of euros for investments, private investments, public investments and joint investments. The EU, for those investments, also is able to acquire other additional funds from the EU sources. Well, we can consider different solutions here. Perhaps we should go back to the discussion about a possible digital tax for the EU budget. Maybe it is time to seriously consider a possible discussion about perhaps fees that would need to be paid by foreign citizens entering the EU, similar to the system used in the United States, now in the United Kingdom. No, the EU certainly is not, and is not going just to be a museum of the world. Some, well, jokingly say that it's a special place, a museum. But, well, maybe it's time again for foreign guests to pay a small fee to enter the territory of the EU. And those funds could perhaps go to the central budget of the EU. We should perhaps consider other options. Yet again, perhaps we could think about our joint investment funds and new recovery plans for the future. This certainly is not going to be enough. We need even more funds, common funds for more efficient, better investments of the future. But we also need change in the structure of this spending.
We certainly must keep the things that have worked well. If something in that time proved efficient, it should stay. And a very efficient and very good invention of the EU is the cohesion policy, and a very important element of it, namely the subjective role of regions. That role really means that they are the subjects, the locals are the subjects. The local governments, they are closest to people, and they are the key here. We invented it, we've used it for years, and that should stay with us. The change should be vested not in throwing away the good that has very well served us proudly for so many years. No, we simply need change. We need to draw from the good conclusions that we received from the NRP, bringing together reforms and investments with major reforms that proved efficient and that should go on with us in planning the future joint European investment policy and also the policy of development. For that to work, we need yet another very important element. We need a particular review of the single market. We need a review of competition policies, innovation policies, and also public procurement policies. Let us draw conclusions from the reforms rejected by Europeans, parts of the Green Deal, for example. And people are ready for change, but this change has to have good associations, and they must bring profitability, efficiency, greater and higher quality of life. If change goes this way, it will be approved with hope by citizens of Poland, France, Germany, Spain, and all of us, the citizens of the European Union. And there is one more thing that we need: deregulation. There have been many white papers in the EU. Why not create another, this time about those regulations that are no longer needed in acquis communautaire, the white paper of what we can simplify, remove, and go on so that things work easier and in a more understandable way for business and for people. It's a great choice that we have and that we're facing, the choice between the Europe of stagnation and the Europe of hope and courageous change. That choice has a very particular result, the policy of cohesion, which is the diamond in the crown of the EU, but also the single market, which is this brother, twin, sister of the cohesion policy and the development and investment policy of the EU. Ladies and gentlemen, Europe is great, which we have been recently forgetting. It's the largest developmental project based on peace and values. This is a project that has brought well-being to millions of people. That is a project that keeps decreasing the inequalities in Europe while they keep on growing throughout the world. That is why let us respect our project, let us have hope and faith that it will go on forward. And Poland is a part of that project and is ready to take full co-responsibility for the changes that we very badly need today. Thank you very much.
Dziękujemy bardzo.
Thank you, Minister Katarzyna Pełczyńska-Nałęcz. May I now invite the Deputy President of European Commission, Raffaele Fitto.
Marshal Olovna, Minister Pelizdan Alex, Minzato di Rossana, Major Misaski, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for this timely opportunity to come together to discuss Europe's growth policy and the role of European cohesion policy. Particular thanks to Minister for the organization and welcome. I'm very glad to be in Poland. The convergence of Poland during its 20 years in the EU is a success story. It is a telling example of what cohesion can deliver. Today, more than ever, we need to learn from experience, such as the one of Poland. As a former president of region and a former cohesion minister, I know the value of experience. And I also know how crucial cohesion policy is. Cohesion policy is more crucial than ever because Europe faces many challenges. Competitiveness in a fast-changing world, the green and digital transitions, the demographic transition with an aging population and demographic decline, especially in rural areas, and competition for skilled workers and brain drain in many European regions. The right to stay means the right of every European to stay in the place they call home. To enjoy the right to stay, there must be good reasons to stay. Strong public services, healthcare and education, and a dynamic private sector, jobs, housing, skills, public transportation, digital connections, food security, clean and safe water, and security. Delivering this is the only way to guarantee to every citizen a real right to stay in the place they call home, particularly in areas facing significant challenges, such as the outermost regions, rural areas, islands, and in particular border regions. I am fully aware of the delicate challenges facing the border regions, notably along our eastern borders. This is why I visited Lappeenranta in Finland last week, just 30 kilometers from the Russian border. The city faces socio-economic issues exacerbated by reduced trade and security concerns, in particular regarding the instrumentalization of migration. These are issues very relevant also in other member states, and it is why we'll also intend to visit the eastern Polish border regions. My visit also carried a strong symbolic message of support for Ukraine. Our solidarity with Ukraine is a concrete defense of our shared European values. Later today, I will honor in Auschwitz the memory of the Jews, of the Polish and of the many other victims of the terrible genocide that took place in the heart of Europe. We must never forget. We must learn from our history and foster our EU values of equality, respect, empathy, and understanding every day to prevent such atrocities. And we must make every effort to protect the people and the regions bearing the greatest cost for the defense of our shared values. Cohesion policy has a key role to play. Over the past years, cohesion policy has always risen to the challenge. But times are changing, and the policy must change with them. We need to ensure that cohesion policy remains focused and effective. It must be modernized. For this, I have written to every minister for cohesion policy. I began meeting them to assess the effectiveness of cohesion policy and identify possible improvements. I have visited Croatia and Finland. Yesterday I met Minister Pelčinska-Nalec, and I found a promising alignment of views on the present and the future of cohesion. We will work together to ensure the success of the policy presidency on these matters. I am receiving ministers in Brussels in the coming weeks. I will continue to engage. I will be in very close contact with the European Parliament, notably its Regi Committee, which hosted me on Tuesday, and with the Committee of the Regions, as well as with the many stakeholders involved in cohesion. I will discuss with them to foster a more secure, resilient and competitive union. I will stress the fundamental role of cohesion policy in meeting these goals. My key messages are as follows. First, to accelerate the implementation of the current programs. As you know, this cycle had a slower start than the previous one. In recent months, there have been some improvements, but more needs to be done. In the letter to ministers, I outlined the importance of the upcoming mid-term review of cohesion programs. It is a golden opportunity to ensure that funding is absorbed more rapidly, to take the next step in adapting the policy to emerging needs, to realign program priorities. I encourage all of you in this room who can contribute to the review in your country to avoid a bureaucratic approach and make the best of this exercise by accelerating expenditure and by looking for ways to simplify the procedures. Second message, we need to progress on the key initiatives put forward by President von der Leyen in her political guidelines, among them the EU Agenda for Cities and access to affordable and sustainable housing. A stronger focus on urban development can help address the needs of the 75% of Europeans living in cities and urban areas. For this reason, the Commission will develop an agenda for cities. It will outline the EU's strategic approach to sustainable urban development, focusing on housing, climate action, digitalization, mobility, social inclusion and equality. Local authority, as Major Misalski knows, will have a key role to play. I intend to work closely with mayors in developing and implementing this agenda. While the timeline for preparing the political agenda is still under discussion, stakeholder involvement is vital. Attractive European cities must also offer affordable homes. And housing is also crucial in rural areas and less developed regions. Cohesion policy has long supported the EU housing sector with significant investments, making housing greener, more resilient, and more accessible. However, more work is needed. The Commission is working on two fronts. We are preparing the first European plan for affordable housing. The proposed change will enable Member States to double investment in affordable housing and inject liquidity into the market. Additionally, we will roll out the new European Bauhaus. This initiative will ensure housing projects are inclusive, sustainable and climate resilient, but also more integrated and enriching for the environments and communities around them. Third message, we need to prepare for the next cycle of cohesion policy. With upcoming negotiations for the next MFF, we are at a decisive point. Cohesion policy must continue to add value for the Union. How will we do this? By focusing strategically on our joint priorities, reducing economic, social and territorial disparities across the EU, by aligning the policy, by simplifying the EU funding landscape, both for beneficiaries and managing authorities, and creating synergies across EU funds and instruments, by following the guiding star of a more effective policy. This calls for a more performance-based delivery model through a combination of investment and reforms, and through good governance and administrative capacity building, by interventions which are tailor-made for each Member State, each region, each city, by giving local and regional authorities a say in the design, management and implementation, by higher flexibility, keeping the focus on long-term objectives, but making room for emerging priorities. And last but not least, by listening to those who know the needs and the challenges the best. The key actors of cohesion policy, such as you all in the room today. And my fourth and final message is that the Commission will listen carefully. Today and until the cohesion policy of the next cycle will be put in place. We need to write a new chapter in our policy. Your input will be relevant for the preparation of the future of our policy. And for our work together, over the coming years. Our common goal is clear: to reinforce cohesion policy, to deliver tangible benefits for all Europeans. Let us write this chapter together. Let us write it well for all regions of Europe and for our future. Thank you.
Raffaele Fito, thank you very much.
Raffaele Fito, thank you very much. And now, Executive Vice President of the Commission for People Skills Preparedness, Roxana Misatu.
Poland, good morning, Krakow. Thank you for the sunshine. Minister, you did a wonderful job. For us people for coming from Brussels and from many places, we really enjoy to be part of these Polish presidency events and to discuss with you in this very productive framework the future of Europe, the present of Europe, the future of Europe. I would share two concepts from two of the previous speakers: hope and togetherness. Dear Minister, Commissioner, dear guests, I've started work in cohesion policy in Romania exactly 20 years ago as Poland became a member of the European Union, but at that time my home country was still preparing for it. My first project was supported by European cohesion policy, a sewerage network for a village. And at that time, I associated the idea of European Union and cohesion policy with hope, with solutions. And it is, I think, with this mindset that we need to continue to work. The cohesion policy has always been in the DNA of the European project. And for it to be able to adapt to a more agile economy, to an ever-changing global stage and internal stage, to all these challenges that we understand and we see and we face, and we have also faced, we need also to work together, as Commissioner Fito mentioned. I am telling you here today, I am the Commissioner in charge for social rights for the European Social Fund Plus, that strong arm of the cohesion policy that is responsible for our social cohesiveness, for our social fiber. And I am telling you today, as a commissioner in charge with our social agenda, with our social way of being, of our social model, let's say, our market social economy, that we are the European Union together, that each policy that we design, each decision that we make about our future is not in Brussels or in Warsaw or in Oslo or in Paris. It is all of ours together. It is our ability to spot courageously those shared common directions. It is our ability together to recognize that for the sake of our national and European identity, we are stronger together, and to take the decisions that are good for us. And one such decision, and that is why I wanted to be here to join you and my colleagues in the Commission. One of these strong and important decisions are that the cohesion policy is part of Europe's drive for competitiveness. Cohesion policy is part of Europe's drive for security, for preparedness. They are not separate avenues. It is not this or that, either or. At the same time, it is our belief, I'm sure in this room we are preaching to the choir, but we should, let's say, exchange and become stronger together, that it is not just the Commission, not just the European Parliament, not just member states, governments, ministers in the Council of the European Union, that create these European decisions and policies and decide the future of our cohesion policy. The regions are very important. In Romania, I will bring again this example. As a Minister of European Funds, I saw what you in Poland have for a long time, and you've been a model for many parts of Europe. The efficiency, legitimacy that the regional organization in EU management of funds, design and funds brought. And I proposed the decentralization of a part of the EU cohesion package to regions that are not legally territorial administrative entities, but still it has been done, and it proves to be part of a solution to be closer to the citizen, to design better policies. So again, let's re-emphasize what we all believe, and we believe it in the Commission. We meet the regions, we are engaged with you, not just with member states, that together we design our policies in a way that make Europe agile, strong, inspirational, proud, with every nation in it, with all our differences and with all our talents. Now, I am responsible to make sure that the policies that we implement with this new Commission, with President von der Leyen, with all the team, with the governments, with the Parliament, in European Parliament, will in the end empower the people. We still have 1 out of 5 Europeans, 20%, at risk of poverty and social exclusion. Now, I'm not saying this to put us down, because Europe, compared to its competitors, including the United States, has much less inequality and a much stronger fiber, much stronger social cohesion. And that is a truly unique asset. But still, poverty is not just part of the European pillar of social rights and a need to, let's say, address so that we ensure decent living, education, wage conditions. Poverty is also potentially an internal threat to our security, because anyone who is in need, who lacks the basic means to pay rent, to pay utilities, to go to school, to afford to buy for their children the things that are needed, of course that person cannot contribute to the strength, to the democracy, to the values of that community, of that country, of that union. So for that, when we invest the European Social Fund Plus to fight poverty throughout Europe, we invest to make sure that Europe is democratic and safe and secure, inside and outside. When we invest through European Social Fund Plus in education and skills, we invest in the, of course, potential of those persons to engage in labor markets, to get decent jobs, quality jobs, to support our economy, but we also support those citizens to be functional and protected and strong in the democracy, in society, online, offline, in face of all the threats that are related to disinformation, misinformation, fake news, harassment, so many things that are new, maybe to our generations, especially with the avenue of new technologies. When we invest the European Social Fund, we invest it to project this digital future that we want for our economy and for our Europe. We want to be tech, let's say, giants, to have our own AI European manufactured tech resources, instruments. But for that, we need to look at European talent to make sure that European brains, talents stay here, that they develop their startups here, that they grow here. We do that with the European Social Fund and with Erasmus. I also coordinate Erasmus+. And this is also a plea for us together, member states, commission, regions, to think of better ways to ensure the synchronicity, the correlation between different funding for common purposes. Let's think about the European University Alliances. Have you heard of them? students or teachers or projects inside them. These are, I think, the greatest tools that are currently supported just by Erasmus, but that could fight brain drain, that could really deliver on what Commissioner Fito mentioned earlier, a right to stay. So many young people from parts of our union, eastern part mostly, again, it's a part that I know better, will choose after graduating high school to go to a university in the Western countries of our union, or in other parts maybe, and their talent and their potential is sometimes used elsewhere, despite the fact that maybe we have invested ESF plus money in their initial education, in their school, in the furniture in the school, in the curriculum, in their extracurriculum activities. Let us think of how we can strengthen tools that we design at European level, European university alliances, multi-campus alliances where a student from Krakow is enlisted in a university here in Poland, but each semester can travel and have all the grades and credits recognized automatically in different universities across Europe, benefit from research, the mobility of professors, his colleagues, and comes back home to be able to have a good degree that is strong compared to the competitors in other parts of the world, that offers him a strong position to continue his research or to invest his talent in the job market. We also need to think of one fact, that as was mentioned here, the cohesion policy needs to be always adapted, more modern, more agile, more simplified. But I hate the word simplification, because ever since I've been entering the world of EU projects and EU programs, there hasn't been a year that we did not talk that this is the year when we simplify. This is the year we're gonna break down. It's a common effort. A common effort we do also with the auditors, with our beneficiaries. But I think ESF Plus is a great example to follow, where we have simplified costs implemented, financing not linked to costs. There are already wonderful things that are happening to make, let's say, the implementation of programs much, much easier. Yesterday in Brussels, the Commission has presented the Competitiveness Compass, and it has 3 directions: innovation, decarbonization, and strategic autonomy, and among the 5 enablers, 2 I will mention: key, simplification, and skills and quality jobs. Let's think of these things as we propose ways to support the strength of our cohesion policy in the future. And I think that we have already good arguments to improve it. Can we design an MFF and a policy where we learn together the good lessons of the cohesion policy, the good legacy, shared management, partnership principle, and the good legacy that is already here from the recovery and resilience mechanism, the performance-based investment and approach, the link between reforms and investments? I am sure that we can, so that we make sure that the cohesion policy is an investment policy that delivers even better, but at the same time, a policy that remains the glue that keeps our union together, communities that keep the legitimacy of our union project stronger. In the end, I will only encourage you to continue to work in this mindset of hope. Cohesion policy is always part of a solution. Whatever challenges our union has faced, or most of them, it has been COVID, the increase of prices of energy. We have responded so many times using exactly this cohesion policy. And sometimes we were indeed a bit discontent because we need to maintain the purpose of the policy. But now we must face the truth. This is not a world where the goals established once 7 years, once every 10 years remain the same. We have crisis after crisis. We need preparedness. We need to be prepared. Cohesion needs to be able to be designed to answer the preparedness ambitions of our union. And that's how it will remain or become even stronger. It is, I think, a very good promise to build on. We have so many good lessons to build upon. It is up to us to listen to each other, to take the best practices, and to design the best response that the Union has always been able to design. That's in our DNA. It's in our DNA. That we are stronger when we are cohesive, we are stronger when we are together, and that the cohesion policy is one of the best vitamins that Europe can invest in its own immunity, vitality for the future. Thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be here today with you.
Roxana Minzaty, thank you very much. Roxana, in Poland we have just 60 sunny days during a year, so I think it's your positive attitude and energy which brought the sun today. Thank you very much. Na zakończenie wypowiedzi otwierających zapraszam jeszcze prezydenta Krakowa, pan Aleksander Miszalski.
For closing this session, may I invite Mr. Aleksander Miszalski, the mayor of Kraków.
Panie Marszałku,
Mr. Marshal, Ms. Minister, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, presidents, members of parliaments, members of local and regional authorities, self-governments. First of all, I wanted to welcome all of you to Kraków and to thank you for choosing our city for the place where you organize your conference. Always when such fantastic guests arrive, we order good weather, so it's not a coincidence that we've got sun today. We are today in ICE Kraków Congress Center, the Congress Center that, of course, would have never been here without the support of the European Union. Nearly 100 million of Polish zloty co-financing, a fourth of the cost of this building, according to the plan, was spent. So in 2014, this center was completed thanks to this support. It's not the only venue in Kraków that we built with the support of the European Union. There are tens of such venues in Kraków. You visitors and we locals, people of Kraków, pass them by every day on our daily routes. Altogether, in the 20 years of Polish membership in the EU, Kraków received 5 billion support from the EU. Altogether, 420 projects at the cost of nearly 10 billion Polish zloty. This is a gigantic volume that supported our culture, tourist bid, healthcare, all the different scopes. Today we are following the lodestar of this presidency, Secure Europe. Our cities participate in this security, which is so very important for us today. On the one hand, internal security, reinforcing the readiness for defense, the new act that lays certain new duties on the local governments, also new funds. Kraków is getting ready for its implementation. Also security in energy, photovoltaics, thermal energy, heat pumps possibly as well. We also try to protect the locals as the local governments. Preventive programs in health, various procedures we implemented during the pandemic, and also food safety that Kraków signed. I've recently signed the Milan Pact and all the policies that are there to make us as self-sufficient in food production as possible. But you're going to discuss today something that is extremely important for self-governments, the reform of the cohesion policy. Poland was and is one of the states that make the best use of the funds, both the EU funds from the cohesion policy, both those targeted at specific issues and those that just become part of budget. In the perspective of long-term financial framework 14 to 20, 41% of the funds were spent as part of regional operational programs. In the following perspective, 21-27, this goes up to 44%, 45 billion euro, and then integrated territorial investments, 5 billion euro. As a member of local government, as thinking in my self-governmental way, in my own name and on behalf of men similar to me and the Union of Polish Metropolitan Centers, I'd like to appeal to you that discussing the reform of cohesion policy, you leave this money at the regional level that we used to have, at least that level, because this principle of subsidiarity was very important. Now, reverting that logic towards centralism will be detrimental, will be very dangerous for the development of self-government. Centralization is moving investments away from the locals, from those stakeholders who know best what these funds are necessary for. That's decreasing resilience to politics. Resilience goes down. That's debilitating the role of cities and regions. And I would like to ask you that this principle of subsidiarity is retained, that the role and participation of local authorities is not diminished, is retained, to retain the integrated services, also to reinforce the metropolitan role of large cities, because the situation may be dynamic and sometimes we need flexibility to make sure that there is participation, social dialogue, because these ideas are very close to our Polish heart. Closing, I'd like to say that Kraków indeed will always be in favor of strengthening European integration, reinforcing all those values that we share, namely solidarity, democracy, and also equal opportunities policy. May I wish you a fruitful time and obviously a pleasant time tonight in Kraków. Thank you very much. The Mayor of Kraków, Mr. Aleksander Miszalski, thank you very much. Sitting here and listening to all those speeches, I had just this afterthought after our first experience. Well, I'm afraid that you have texted your partner. My neighbor told me to look at everyone around me. Sorry, don't blame it on me. Well, I'm thinking about smile during our cooperation. We say a lot about cooperation, but in our daily life we forget that the best way for breaking the ice, people may not know one another, is just to smile at them. That's why throughout the day we're going to encourage you, and today as well. I've got some housekeeping remarks for you. First of all, participants in this event have free transport in Kraków for the coming 2 days, enough to have your ID card and visit the city free of charge. Also, the building where we are, on the ground floor, there are exhibitions by beneficiaries of European funds rooted in the contemporary. I very much enjoy this phrase because it is a fruit, as you know, the apple that is the symbol of the Polish presidency in the European Union. Symbols can be found throughout the site, so enjoy your apples if you only feel like having one. Should you have any questions, there are volunteers on the ground floor. There is also an info kiosk and then information about our security. In the case of alarm, please move towards the nearest evacuation exit. They are marked with green lights, and the assembly point is at the car park in front of the main entry. Persons managing evacuation will wear high visibility jackets, and you can also turn to your assistants. Before the discussion panel to which we are moving, we already have here the chairs. I have one more piece of news for you. During the panel, we're going to use a tool for opinion polling, and we encourage you to participate in this discussion. It will be very useful. Let's run now a short test. Get your mobiles ready, take them out, and get into www.menti.com. You can also try the QR code. You'll have several seconds now. Okay, now once you have entered it, you'll have to enter this code, 54379497. Are we there? I'm looking at you. Do we need some more time? Who is already on menti.com? Hand up. 3 people? Okay. If it's only 3 people, then we'll wait for another few minutes. Once again, please, you can either use the QR code, then you'll very quickly get to where you need to enter this code. Sorry. Okay, I can see you're already answering. Well, that's your startup question. Is this your first time to Kraków? In a moment, you'll see the answers. I'm waiting for some confirmation whether we can already now give you the results. As you see, those are changing. So that's a good proof that you can actively participate in the discussion we will have here. And the number I've mentioned to you, if you need it, is at the top of the screen. PIN 54379497. And to wrap up, whichever visit to Kraków this is for you, you can always discover something new here because it's a beautiful city we encourage you to visiting. I'll tell you later about the excursions we have for you. And that's the time when we can already pass on to the first discussion panel. And this is our lodestar, Safety Europe. We will be talking about safety of EU in the context of economy and the particular role of the cohesion policy. The first panel will focus on the assessment of the cohesion policy in various contexts, like reinforcement of resilience and economic resilience, digital transformation, green transformation, and the future of cohesion policy, especially the new challenges it is facing. The title of the panel is How Does the Cohesion Policy Build Powerful Europe? Results so far and new challenges. The discussion will be in English. Of course, you can use your headsets. Let me only add that during the panel, we will be using Mentimeters, so please participate. May I now invite Ms. Anna Kalczyńska of TVP World, ready for battle. She will be the moderator for this session, and a big round of applause for her, please. Good morning. Thank you very much, Marcin.
Thrilling for me to be here in Kraków and to greet you in one of the most beautiful places in Poland. On a personal note, as so much already has been done and said, let me just tell you that it's a thrilling experience for me to be here as a Polish journalist and to bear witness to all the long road that we've crossed as Poland and how wonderful we took advantage of the cohesion funds so far. So just as Marcin has said, we will focus in this panel on 2 aspects. First, we will try to resume and to sum up all the achievements, all the successes of the cohesion fund so far and of the cohesion policy. And of course, we will look ahead. It's not only about putting ourselves on the shoulders, but we need to face the future, a turbulent time ahead. So we will be discussing about the challenges that face us. So let me now invite to the floor our distinguished speakers. And I will ask you for a round of applause. Tony Murphy, President of the European Court of Auditors. Vasco Alves Cordeiro, President of the European Committee of the Regions. Jan Szyszko, Secretary of State at the Ministry of Development Funds and Regional Policy, Poland. Bernhard Klutich, State Secretary, Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Climate Action, Germany. Gentlemen, please take your seats. As you wish. Themis Christophidou, Director General of the Directorate for Regional and Urban Policy, European Commission. Madame Céline Gauer, Director General of the Recovery and Resilience Task Force, Secretariat General, European Commission. And Madame Adriana Sukova, Deputy Director General Funds, Fair Transition and Analysis, Director for Employment, Social Affairs and Inclusion, European Commission. Good morning, good morning. Please take your seats. So we'll begin with a short 3-minute video showing the results and the effects of the cohesion policy so that we all can just know what we're talking about.
Unia Europejska powstała z potrzeby zapewnienia.
The European Union emerged out of the need to provide security, stability and freedom. Needs essential for all its inhabitants, regardless of country or region of origin. These coalesced into a space for multilateral support and development, a community that helps one another, strengthening the whole Europe.
Wynikiem tej idei są równe szanse rozwoju, edukacja i perspektywy dostępne dla wszystkich Europejczyków. Tak różni pod względem osobowości, talentów czy tradycji, jednocześnie równi sobie, tak samo zdecydowani, tak samo solidarni i wspierający się w rozwoju. Taka właśnie jest polityka spójności. Dzięki niej w 242 regionach Unii Europejskiej stale zmniejszają się nierówności gospodarcze i infrastrukturalne. Postępuje integracja, chronione są prawa podstawowe i rozwija się demokracja. Polityka spójności to wzrost gospodarczy. Dzięki inwestycjom i programom PKB w krajach Europy Środkowo-Wschodniej wzrósł z około 52% średniej dla Unii Europejskiej do nawet 80%. Tak cała Europa staje się silniejsza. Bezpieczeństwo i transformacja energetyczna. Nie tylko udało się zwiększyć ilość energii dostarczanej ze źródeł odnawialnych, ale także istotnie wzmocnić niezależność energetyczną Europy. Transformacja cyfrowa. Blisko 8 milionów gospodarstw domowych uzyskało szerokopasmowy dostęp do internetu w całej Unii Europejskiej. Modernizacja infrastruktury. Wybudowano ponad 3,5 tysiąca kilometrów nowych dróg oraz zmodernizowano ponad 2000 kilometrów linii kolejowych. Troska o stan środowiska. Ponad 9 milionów osób uzyskało dostęp do systemów oczyszczania ścieków, 8 milionów do sieci wodociągowej. Zwiększono zdolność recyklingu odpadów o 3,5 miliona ton rocznie. Dzięki polityce spójności Unia Europejska staje się lepszym miejscem do życia, wzmacniając swoją konkurencyjność wobec całego świata. Europa wzmocniona instrumentami polityki spójności jest silniejsza, bo bardziej zintegrowana. Dzięki temu nawet najtrudniejsze wyzwania, takie jak pandemia COVID-19, wojna w Ukrainie czy kryzys energetyczny, są możliwe do pokonania. Polityka spójności stała się gwarantem bezpieczeństwa zdrowotnego, społecznego, energetycznego Europy. Razem tworzymy przyszłość, razem nadajemy jej kształt, razem dbamy o rozwój Europy dla naszych dzieci. Dlatego już dziś musimy zadać sobie pytanie, jak wobec czekających Unię Europejską wyzwań powinna wyglądać w przyszłości polityka spójności.
Right. A well-posed question. As a former stagiaire of DG Press and Communication, I recognize the footage. I remember we used to work on this kind of pictures, and they are still used, so not much has changed in this area, respectively, but we are going to be talking about what has changed and what needs to change today in the cohesion policy. Ladies and gentlemen, first, we would like to encourage you to take part in our discussion as well, so please let me test the Mentimeter instrument for you now. We will ask you a simple question. Do you see tangible effects of cohesion policy projects in your neighborhood? Do you do or do you don't? All right, it's working. Very well. We will later on ask you to ask questions also, if time permits, of course. And so now let's kick off with the first, most general question that we could possibly come up with. And this question will be to Mr. Christophidou. Mr. Christophidou, what, in your opinion, are the key achievements of cohesion policy in strengthening the competitiveness of European policy? I'm sorry, Mrs. Christophidou, I'm sorry.
Hello. Thank you. Well, it's difficult to make more convincing points than the two vice presidents of the European Commission made, but also the minister that explained how much this policy is transformative. So what can I add more to what they said? Cohesion policy is the biggest structural transformative investment policy that the EU has ever had. It's a policy that has brought the member states that joined the EU in 2004 from a GDP per capita under 50% to an 80% in 20 years. I think this is a massive proof that speaks for itself. It's a policy that is investing from connectivity in terms of roads and rails to digital infrastructure. It's a policy that invests in people, in talents, in skills, in education. It's a policy that invests in health, that supports massively SMEs and startups. We have, in the recent years, invested 70 billion in startups. Only Poland has utilized 16 billion on this territory. The mic doesn't work? No. Closer? Okay. I think I speak loud enough generally. I think that the competitiveness of Europe, it was said also earlier, competitiveness and cohesion are also, for me, the two sides of the same coin. This is never an either or. This cannot be one without the other. And we cannot not fulfill the treaty obligation on territorial cohesion, which is not just a legal obligation, but it's the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do, to leave no one behind, because it's not by creating black holes in different parts of Europe that we will be competitive, that we will be resilient, that we will take advantage of every talent wherever it is. During the financial crisis of the start of the decade 2010, we saw how Europe had a very big difficulty in catching up, and how much lagging behind regions and also more developed regions struggled to catch up, and member states themselves. After COVID, because we were fast and flexible and agile, and we reprogrammed cohesion funding in order to deal with the consequences of COVID, we saw that the catching up was a lot faster and a lot more equally spread. There were no big differences between regions after COVID, because we had been reacting in an agile way and providing solutions. So yes, cohesion policy is the policy that provides solutions, and I think it has been said a lot today. This country, I came to Poland 20 plus years ago before it joined the EU. I worked on files here at the beginning of my career in the European Commission. This country is not recognizable. It's a different country. And all the member states that joined the EU in the last 20 years, but also the South before. And I will not be so arrogant to claim that it's only thanks to cohesion policy, but I think that everybody who has observed the last decades, including the politicians of this country, national, local, regional, they say their témoignage is that cohesion policy has played an enormous role in this catching up. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I couldn't agree more, Madam Christofoulou. So that was the perspective of the Commission. Now let's turn to the regions, and a question to Mr. Cordeiro. And probably, who knows, it's one of the most difficult questions this time. As the cohesion policy, one of its goals was to counteract polarization and also to reduce disparities in the development of individual regions. So in what extent has this goal been achieved or is being achieved?
Well, thank you so much, and may I take a few seconds to greet my fellow panelists and also to congratulate the Polish presidency for the initiative of this conference in such a defining moment, not only for cohesion policy, but for Europe itself. It is a key initiative at a key moment. And this is why I think, as president of the European Committee of the Regions, that is why I think it's very, very important. Now, getting to the tentative answer to your question. There is one of the achievements of cohesion policy that was not mentioned before, and for me it's one of the most important ones. Cohesion policy is the only EU policy that makes the European Union happen everywhere. From the smallest community in the smallest state to the biggest city in the biggest state, you have cohesion policy working to create this sense of belonging. This may not be so tangible as investments, as buildings, but it is one of the key assets that cohesion policy brings. This is one of the key assets for the European Union. More, in the challenging times we are living, acknowledging this and potentiate this effect of cohesion policy is to make the European Union stronger. In what concerns to other contributions of cohesion policy to fight polarization and how it achieves, if, as it is, cohesion policy is a way to make Europe more cohesive from the economic, social, territorial point of view, that's a way to fight polarization. That's a way to make people feel hope, that was already mentioned here today, about the future. And you just have to look to the 9th cohesion report that was published last year by the European Commission to see how much was done and the potential that cohesion policy has for the future. Now, there are some challenges. I think we'll get to that in a few minutes. But the question makes me alert for something I call a trap in the debate over cohesion policy. And that is the trap of considering that cohesion policy is a charity policy. It's the policy for the less developed regions. It's a policy for the less developed states. That is simply not true. Cohesion policy is available for all regions, and it must continue being available to all regions, with different eligibility criteria, with different co-financing rates, but it helps each region overcome successfully its own challenges. In some regions, for example, let's mention automotive regions that have a challenge concerning the decarbonization. There you have cohesion policy to help them achieve that. But in other regions, smallest regions, with infrastructure developments, there you have cohesion policy to help them. That is why, being available to all regions, cohesion policy plays a major role in the development of the European Union. You can consider it by the economic development. You can see it by what had happened in the unemployment rate. By all criteria, cohesion policy is one of the biggest success stories of the European Union. And in this moment, I must praise Commissioner, Vice President Fito, and also Vice President Minzagu for their clear statement in defense of a strong cohesion policy. Now, we all know that devil is in details. We'll get to that. But when we heard some times ago some statements questioning the usefulness of cohesion policy, the fact that cohesion policy was outdated, it is of the utmost importance to have that kind of statements that we've heard here today in defense of a strong and renewed cohesion policy. That is why it is so important, this conference, this initiative, and the Polish presidency at this time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cordeiro. Now, our panel is composed of institution representatives and also from government officials. So now I will turn to Mr. Kluti. As we know, Germany is one of the net contributors, biggest net contributors to cohesion funds. So from your perspective, what are the biggest benefits of this policy, and how do you see the implementation of it also in somehow making the disparities lesser evident and lesser visible?
Thank you, and please let me first thank you for having me, and a big thank you to the Minister and her team for organizing this great event. It's a fantastic opportunity to discuss on this important issue of cohesion policy. And I've seen the whole agenda for the 2 days, and it's a very comprehensive agenda with a distinguished speaker. So again, congratulations and thank you for organizing this conference. Coming to your question, yes, it's true that Germany is a main contributor to the EU budget, and as net payer, you are always somehow concerned whether the money is spent wisely, whether it's spent in an efficient and effective manner. At the same time, Germany is also a receiver of funds from cohesion policy, especially with regard to the eastern countries, I mean the eastern Bundesländer in the eastern part of Germany. And I myself, I was born in a city called Karl-Marx-Stadt, Now it's called Chemnitz, and it's one of the European capitals of culture in 2025. And I grew up in a city called Halle, and so I have experienced over the last 30 years since reunification what has developed and how cohesion policy has contributed to the development of these regions. So, you know, it's not only being a net payer, it's also being a receiver, and therefore I really value the cohesion policy for what it has done, especially in the eastern part of Germany. Not only in the eastern part of Germany, there are other regions also, but I myself, I'm the witness. I can really tell what happened there. And of course, the goal of cohesion policy is clear: a Europe that grows together economically, socially, and territorially. And this is a firm commitment of all members, deeply embedded in the Union's treaty. And I would like to highlight 3 aspects, 3 points. First, cohesion policy marks the only policy area in which the Union strategically guides the regions to invest in European priorities according to their need for action. Second, we need an overall harmonious development, and less developed regions are to catch up with stronger ones. This is essential for the EU and its single market to function well. And by that, I would say it's not only the less developed regions that benefit, it's also the developed regions that benefit from cohesion policy, from convergency, as they are, well, as we live in a single market and as there are markets created and opportunities created. Third, cohesion policy is important for the visibility of the EU. In the face of growing Euroscepticism in many regions, it's crucial that people can see how Europe supports its regions and vice versa. So we in Europe also see what happens in the regions. The regions are the areas where the people live, where the people work, where the people marry, where the people raise their families, and where the people eventually dies. That's where the real life happens, and therefore it always needs a place-based approach. We always have to take into account the special needs of the regions, irrespective of whether they are in the far east of Poland or in the far west of Portugal, in the south of Italy or in the north of Sweden. So cohesion policy has brought great achievements. When we look to the future, one thing is clear: cohesion policy is facing need for reform. And Germany published recently a joint statement published by the federal government together with the German Länder on the future of cohesion policy, and it outlines key positions that we deem crucial for drafting a more effective and efficient cohesion policy system. We want cohesion policy to contribute as effectively as possible to achieving the Union's long-term strategic objectives. Therefore, we need strong incentives for the implementation of national reforms, and this is the only way to strengthen the competitiveness and resilience of the Union and enable a just transition. Last but not least, we must also ensure that European funds are used efficiently and effectively and spent for projects which grant European added value. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We will be talking, of course, on the future of cohesion policy very soon. Now, transparency and accountability is very important also for the realization of cohesion policy. Therefore, now let me turn to Mr. Murphy, because cohesion policy is not only about subsidies. In the past financial perspective, we've seen those repayable instruments to be used to a much greater extent, right? So where do you see, what areas do you identify as those where they bring the best results?
Thank you.
Is it working?
Yeah, okay. Morning, everybody. And I'd like to reiterate the comments of my colleague here about thanking the organisers for organising such a fantastic event, and particularly for inviting us as auditors, because we're not always the most popular people in the room, as you can imagine. But I think, yeah, we're safe here, thank you very much. But no, I mean, there's always a negative connotation with auditors, which I hope to...
Therefore, I made the introductory note.
Yeah, which I hope to basically lift today. No, but I mean, honestly, okay, we are auditors, but first and foremost, we're also EU citizens ourselves. I mean, that shouldn't be forgotten, and we fully believe in the EU project. And also, we would reiterate the word of the day seems to be hope, and we are very hopeful for the future of the EU project. Cohesion, as you said, I mean, it's quite a big expenditure area. I mean, it's a large proportion of the budget, as the Director General well knows, and is a big responsibility for the implementation. And as the State Secretary mentioned, what Germany is expecting is that there is proper accountability and that the money is well spent, and that's basically where we come into the picture. So I think cohesion is a very important area for us. We spend a lot of our audit resources on cohesion, I'm sure much to the chagrin of the Director General. But to come back to what you say, I mean, there are negative connotations sometimes about cohesion, and it's nice to hear the positive examples here about I mean, the Director General mentioned Poland. I mean, it's obvious what has been transformation that has happened here. You know, the State Secretary mentioned East Germany. From my perspective in Ireland, I can see it as well. So I think cohesion delivers in terms of, so what we're looking to do is to give an assurance that it's delivering, but in line with rules and being effectively and efficiently implemented, and that's where we see our role. You specifically asked about financial instruments. I mean, and we have seen that financial instruments have been used more widespread across the 2007-13 programming period. I think it was about 17 billion euros. This has increased in the 14-20 period to about 24 billion. But I see in the 21-27 it's back down to just below 20 billion. So it fluctuates in terms of the proportion of financial instruments as part of the overall envelope. I think everyone is aware that financial instruments are, you know, the advantages of financial instruments compared to grants are obvious. I mean, people have obligations under financial instruments which would probably, you know, improve performance, let's say. There's also the very real issue of the revolving nature of the funds, so that the funds can be reused when the loans are repaid. I mean, we've seen I think the big issue when we look at financial instruments is that there is a bigger appetite in some member states to use them than in others. In our, we had an SME competitiveness report in 2022 where we encouraged and invited the Commission to basically invite and support Member States to use financial instruments as far as possible. As I say, in line with this revolving nature, we will issue an audit report soon on the revolving impact of the 14-20 funds, so that will be later in the year, the second half of this year. But I think there needs to be some investment, if you like, in terms of convincing member states to go down this road. I mean, we have 3 member states where they have no financial instruments at all. There are another 3 or 4 who are very involved in them. You know, Greece, Italy and Hungary are one of at the forefront of financial instruments in terms of both the absolute values and also in terms of the percentage of the cohesion funds that they absorb. But in the middle, there's a whole plethora of member states who use it they use them, but to a very low degree. So I think there is definitely room for improvement in the use of financial instruments. Obviously, wherever they're being used, there has to be a need for them. And what we see is, you asked where's the main area where they're used. you know, in the 24, 20, 22 tours of the financial instruments relate to SME competitiveness. And this is the area really where, you know, SMEs are the big beneficiaries of financial instruments normally, and it makes sense because these are the people or the entities which are struggling to have access to finance under normal conditions. So that's where I see, you know, there's still room for improvement there because of, as I say, the low take-up in certain member states. I think there's about 1,200 financial instruments for the 14-20 period, which is a slight increase on the previous period. But as I say, we have to make sure that this impetus is maintained and increased, because I say from our perspective as auditors, I mean, we see the added value of if there is the funds come back to be reused again, well, obviously it increases the scope for the use of the funds. You know, there's a leverage effect there in terms of the funds that can be used. So I think that would be an overview of how we see the use of financial instruments in cohesion. Thank you.
So cohesion policy is not only about disparities, it's also about development, as we know, and includes social issues such as sustainable, high-quality job creation. So let me now turn to Mrs. Sukova. What are the specific achievements of cohesion policy in this particular social sphere on EU-wide scale?
First of all, I would like to thank the Polish presidency for organizing the event under the title, The European Way of Growth. We have to think how to make sure that our mechanisms, our instruments that we have in our disposal and we mobilize contribute to a growth which is really keeping the European model of life intact and improving it. And you are rightly asking about the achievements in the area of social investments through the cohesion policy, because in 2014-2020, there was 28% of the cohesion policy budget allocated to achieving social policy objectives. Now we are close to 30%. I believe Celine will mention also the relevance of social investments under the Recovery and Resilience Facility, which is also close to 30%, which means that this aspect of development is equally vital. And I'm very much inspired by the speech of the Marshal of the Sejm, who was really very clear about what are the responsibilities today to think about our future and how we can build our future ourselves. I think that the Minister also mentioned and drew the attention of the possible scenarios about developing Europe. And of course, everybody wants to see a growing Europe, a more important Europe in the world. And this goes through the investments in people. Investments in people for their education, for their upskilling and reskilling throughout their job transitions in life, through the social inclusion. And our Executive Vice President was very clear, paying a lot of attention to the social fabric, the investments in making sure that our social inclusion policies work for all. And I want to give some figures because we asked about achievements so far. First, I'm not quoting something that's not known, because that's the 9th cohesion report, which is very well known by everyone here, I believe. And the assessment is that cohesion policy has had a significant impact on the socio-economic development of all EU regions, and especially in the less developed regions, where our calculations are that the GDP will be 10 to 13% higher with the employment or with the mobilizing of cohesion policy compared to a scenario where we don't have cohesion policy. And this is a remarkable progress. We have the data and the information and the proof that ESF Plus has contributed, and ESF in the last period has contributed to narrowing the disparities in employment among regions by 5% between less developed and more developed regions in the last 15 years. So we are giving equal opportunities for everyone in Europe with the support of the European Social Fund to upskill, to find their way of work development and also finding a good quality job. We know that unemployment in Europe has gone to a very low, record low level. Employment is also very high. Now we're at 75.3% of employment. and this will help with all efforts of everyone in Europe to achieve the target that was set in 2021, to achieve 78% of employment of people at working age by 2030. We are very well on track on that. My colleague Temis mentioned the impact of COVID on our ability to react and respond very quickly to the needs at that time. And of course, 1.4 billion euro were of direct support were employed for supporting social service provisions, maintaining employment in mostly affected sectors, including through short-time work schemes, protecting vulnerable groups, and fund wages for healthcare personnel, IT equipment, protective equipment, and so on. I believe that the support is much higher, but this was really what was reprogrammed with all the programs under cohesion policy. Just 2 sentences about Poland. I know that in Poland, cohesion policy is very, very visible. The gap between Poland and the average level of socio-economic development has increased by 1/3, and this is really something that we can never say. It can probably not be totally kind of related to cohesion policy, but I believe that cohesion policy was a driver for that, reducing disparities. And also, we have a lot of positive effects of cohesion policy in Poland in the creation of new jobs, improvement of qualifications of employees, allowing for their better adaptation to changing conditions of the labor market. A very important achievement is the increase of women participation on the labor market, and supporting people at risk of social exclusion, people with disabilities. There is a commendable program, Accessibility Plus program in Poland, which was really supporting more than 3 million people with disabilities to find their way in the social inclusion path and also into the labor market. I think that there are a lot of examples. I really have pages of positive examples, but I believe this gives a slight overview of why social element of cohesion policy is so important. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So, since you mentioned Poland, let's follow up on that. I remember at the beginning of our path in European Union, Poland was given an example of Ireland. We were supposed to become the second Ireland. So have we become a second Ireland, Mr. Minister? And so what achievements do you see would have not been possible without European funds?
Thank you for that. And Tony, you're most welcome in Poland, always. This being said, Poland does not aspire to be the second Ireland, the second Japan. I mean, what the Marshal has said in his very strong and quite impressive and inspiring speech to Europe, I believe very firmly. In the model of growth, Poland does not aspire to copy anyone. We are creating our own model and being quite successful at that, and very much looking forward to inspiring others as well, such as Ireland's growth model has to some extent inspired us and countries like us as well. I think it's very, very important also for Europe to have its own growth model, not exactly focusing on copying others. We do not need to make Europe great again. We are great. We just need to reevaluate some policies and some decisions that we have made, but go our own path. And coming to your question on the effects of the cohesion policy in Poland, of course, I could talk very long about the gas pipelines, about the terminals, the roads and rail infrastructure of this country that has appeared here, has been built here over the last 20 years, and has translated into an unprecedented macroeconomic effect. Yes, the cohesion policy has been the growth policy of this country and countries like that. But I think there is one other fact that I think measures and catches the success of cohesion policy a bit better. Poland is divided into 380 powiats, districts, administrative districts that divide the country from north to south, from east to west. Every single one of those powiats has grown over the last 20 years. Every single one. And this is the European way of growth. It's a fair, just growth that is spread across the country, that takes care of every European citizen, no matter if they live in the center of Krakow or, you know, in the most rural area close to the Polish-Lithuanian border. This is what differs us from the States, for example, as well, and from the growth model from across the pond. And this is the growth model that we have to bear in mind and develop even stronger in the future. And this being said, we here know very well that the cohesion policy, or more broadly, the growth policy of the European Union, needs to evolve. It needs to change. Like every good policy, it needs to evolve and adjust to the current needs. But in this evolution, it needs to remember what the fundamentals are, and this is why we are very open to a discussion on the midterm review. That we know it's a very timely topic. It's a great occasion to make some most urgent changes that would reflect the current priorities of 2025, perhaps better reflected in the European funds that we have available. We also know that Europe needs to, as Minister said, look very closely, not only what to regulate, but also what to deregulate. And I'm very happy that this was mentioned in the Competitiveness Compass announcement yesterday, that this is also the direction that we need to make Europe simpler and investments easier and safer and more attractive in Europe. In that midterm review, we could look to innovate more. We could look to support social housing. We could look to invest in all those areas that haven't been perhaps so apparent 5 years ago, because the world has changed in those 5 years and are more apparent today and more pressing today. We do not have the time to wait until 2027. Yes, bold moves are needed in the future. We need to look for more funds, new own resources, new ways to raise new investment money, the money to invest in our own independence and security. But we also have to act in the next coming months, very, very soon, because, well, we know that the events since the 20th of January are speeding up, and Europe needs to be up to date and take investment adjustments and investment decisions very, very sharply. We're very happy to inspire also with the Polish growth model in those changes that are, I'm sure, soon to be made. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now to Madam Gauer. Since EU investment instruments are not just cohesion policy, to what extent the RRF, that is the Recovery and Resilience Facility, visible already? And can you point to any particular areas where this instrument is effective?
Thank you very much. And thank you also very much to the organizers of this impressive event and very timely discussion on the future of cohesion. So the RRF doesn't have decades of history, but only 4 years of implementation behind it. But of course, there are already very visible and very tangible results on the ground. Already to date, so 4 years after the start, 300 billion, so almost the entire budget for cohesion on the overall 7 years, has already been dispersed on the basis of the RRF. And there are 3 elements where we can already see these very tangible results. The first one is a recovery. So why do we have the RRF? Why did we have Next Generation EU in the middle of the pandemic? Because the heads of state and government wanted to avoid a repetition of the financial crisis that was already referred to. And that has worked. We have seen the GDP level picking up already in 2021 and recovering the pre-pandemic level. So an incredibly fast reaction. We have seen that the single market stayed together. And the fragmentation of the single market that had followed the financial crisis didn't happen. And that was not only to the benefit of those who would not have been able to have had their own recovery fund for lack of means, but also to those who were exporting to those countries, because that kept the single market and the business opportunities alive for all. And thirdly, the level of public investment that had collapsed during or following the financial crisis didn't collapse, but on the contrary, picked up. So all studies already demonstrate that the recovery part of the Recovery and Resilience Facility has remarkably well functioned. The second thing that has worked extremely well is the inclusion of reforms. That was referred by many as an obvious thing for the future, and it is indeed obvious, because when we look at how it has worked in the RRF, it is truly impressive. Let me give you just a few examples. Labor market in Spain. I think the labor market in Spain was traditionally fragmented, undermining the effectiveness of all the investment that we were making in the ESF, with the social fund, years after years, because what about reskilling people if they can't stay in the place of employment? Thanks to the RF, we had this labor market reform very early in the plan. It has been passed. It already shows a very, very sharp decrease of this temporary contract, and Spain reaching finally the average level of the European Union. So that was a decade-long issue that was all of a sudden solved thanks to the incentive given by the fund. Another long-lasting problem, justice system in Italy, undermining the competitiveness of companies in that country. 90% of the backlog in only 3 years was removed, both in first and second instance, thanks to the reform of the justice and the investments that accompanied it. And third, take waiting time in hospitals. We talk a lot about citizens, that's what we all work for. Waiting times in hospitals due to reforms and investment in Croatia divided by 3 for patients waiting for a diagnosis. And these are only 3 examples. I don't want to take up the whole time, so I will leave it there for reforms, but we already have to date, not waiting for 2026, we have already to date many of those very positive examples already on the ground. And thirdly, and that's a common element with cohesion, investments, of course. So investments are rolled out, investments are already on the ground finished. Take the Riga Children Emergency Department of the Children's Hospital. It is there, it is functioning, patients are coming in. Take kindergarten in Poland or in Croatia, they are already open. Mothers and fathers can finally get back to the labor market where they are much needed. And take trams and train lines that are already in Slovenia, in France, functioning thanks to this. Take homes, millions of homes that have, in the more remote parts of our countries, access to 5G, which they didn't have before, and energy efficiency renovations completed. So yes, there is a very, very long list of investments already implemented and visible underground for citizens and also for business that have been supported in their decarbonization, in their digitalization, and that are benefiting of an unprecedented investment in research already to date. So yes, 4 years of accelerated implementation have really done miracle for this, and this is extremely good news. And just to finish on your last question, what has proven particularly effective? I think 3 things. The first one is this combination of reforms and investment, which is absolutely critical. The second one is a performance-based, meant as you commit to do something and you do it. So it is a contract between each and every member state and the EU to make sure that what is committed in investment and reform is actually delivered as committed. And thirdly is one single set of simple rules across the board for all sectors, avoiding, for example, when Russia invaded Ukraine, allowing very, very fast reaction to reprioritization of policies, because it is just one single set of rules and it's very easy to operate. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this European perspective, truly European, with all those examples coming from different member states. Ladies and gentlemen, so this concludes the first round of our questions. Now I would like to encourage you to take another question. We pre-selected certain options for you, and we would like to ask the following. In which areas do you see the greatest impact of cohesion policy? You can have a choice of transport, environment, enterprise development, research and innovation, reduction of regional disparities, social issues, and digitalization. So it changes, as you can see, but transport remains, I think, comes first, definitely. So we will get inspired, hopefully, ahead of the next round of questions. We will now focus on the future of cohesion policy. So my first question goes to Mr. Kluti, if I may. And we will be talking about topics on EU agenda, is climate change. So how should cohesion policy respond to the challenges in this area?
Thank you for your question, and please allow me to deviate slightly from your questions. Politicians normally tend to give answers to questions that not have been asked, and and I mean, I will also. I mean, we have a discussion here, and therefore, I would like to touch upon things that have been said by the minister, by the vice president, by the marshal, and by others here. And I'll come back to the question, or also, touch on the issue of climate change. But I mean, we have said that we don't need to make Europe great again because Europe is great already, and I would totally agree. But if I walk around, I haven't had the chance to walk around in Krakow, but so far, but at least in Germany and also in other areas, in other countries, there is some like state or mood of depression. Everybody thinks, well, there needs something to happen, and it needs to happen now, and therefore, I agree with what was said. Europe is already great, but that does not mean that we can sit back and relax, but we have to act. And if it's just adjustments, or if it's if larger steps for reforms are needed, that can be discussed. But which is clear, we need to act. And the thing what is needed, the overreaching principle, or the leading principle must be, how can we strengthen competitiveness in Europe? Yesterday the Commission presented the competitiveness compass, and in end of February, I think on the 26th of February, we all wait for the presentation of the Clean Industrial Deal and the Omnibus Directive and the Affordable Energy Package. So it's all about competitiveness, and I think it's important that every action must be measured against this question: how does it contribute to strengthen the competitiveness of Europe? This is not only with regard to cohesion policy, but it's also with regard to competition policy, with regard to state aid, and so on. And then, coming back to cohesion policy, where does this competitiveness takes place? It takes place in the regions, and it takes place in different regions with different demands, with different needs. As I said, the regions on the eastern Polish border probably have different needs than the regions in Germany or in France or wherever. But we all share, or should share, the same goal: strengthening competitiveness and accepting all the differences. So coming back to the European motto, united in diversity, but all with the same goal: how can we ensure that Europe stays and remains great? And now coming to the green transition. I totally agree with what the Marshal said with regard to need for reform and so on. I'm always a little bit reluctant when it comes to a revision of the Green Deal or a revision of climate targets. He didn't say that, to be clear, but he said that we need to rethink the green transition. And I would also agree on that. We probably need a more flexible and a more pragmatic approach, but we must not give up the final target of becoming climate neutral in Europe. And why is that? This also is part of becoming more competitive. It's also part of becoming more resilient. So far, Europe imports 60% of its energy demand. 60%, mainly fossil sources. And this is everything but a resilient strategy. In order to become competitive, in order to become more resilient, we need the green transition in the energy sector, in the industry, in the end, to reach the goal of having a competitive, resilient Europe that has a strategic autonomy, that reaches a strategic autonomy. And again, there's not one solution fits all. There's no one solution that is created in Brussels that can be applied in east of Poland or in north of Germany. We need to accept the differences in the region, but again, we need to strengthen. That must be the goal. We need to strengthen the competitiveness. And to pick up what the Marshal said, he said, hope must sell, or sells better than fear. I also totally agree, but I would like to supplement that phrase with actions speak louder than words. So let's get to work on it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, indeed. So to follow up, we witness this twin transition. On one hand, the green transition, on the other, digital. We understand that this is going to be crucial for the development of European Union. Now, what response should the cohesion policy have or provide in order to strengthen the stable and sustainable development of all EU regions, Mr. Cordeiro?
Thank you so much for the question, but I will follow the example of my fellow panelists, and I would like to add something to something that was already said. And the first thing is about this competitiveness issue. Probably we are all saying the same thing, but I would like to express it this way, if you allow me. Words mean something. And we cannot confuse competitiveness, cohesion. We are all talking about the same thing. No. The treaties establish a clear goal for the European Union: territorial, social, and economic cohesion. Competitiveness may be and should be an instrument to achieve that cohesion. It cannot be elected as the ultimate goal right now of the European Union. This is the difference. For me, it's not irrelevant. And it is very, very important that from day one, we clearly identify what are we talking about. Competitiveness cannot make us forget that cohesion is the goal, is established in the treaties as the ultimate goal. And if the treaties still mean something, that's where we should be, that's the way. Competitiveness is important because without a strong economy, you are not able. But it's the difference between goal and instrument. The second thing is about this net contributors, net beneficiaries issue. That will be a major battlefield in the months ahead when we discuss the resources for the European Union. But let us not forget that if it is true from the budgetary point of view that you have net contributors and net receivers, from the economic point of view, everybody wins with the cohesion policy and single market. Everybody wins. And in some cases, well, I think it's fair, the so-called major contributors are the major beneficiaries from the economic point of view. So I think it's important also that this is stated very clearly, because this is not a difference between some states receiving money that is paid by other states. This is about Europe. This is how it works. And listen, what the numbers demonstrate is that it has worked this way. Now, going to your question. What the 9th Cohesion Report says is that almost 70 billion euros were spent in the 2014-2020 period to support the green transition. And in this area, and also digital, this brings us for the importance of having local and regional authorities on board. Why? Because in these areas they have competencies, they have the right to intervene. And it is why it's not only important to have them on board to implement the cohesion policy, but also to design and manage. To design, manage, and implement cohesion policy. I think this is also very, very important. And by the way, this stresses the partnership golden principle that the COR, and not only the COR, to be fair, has been putting forward as one of the principles that should be kept in the future. Third, yes, we need a more agile cohesion policy in the future. Too much regulation. It brings confusion not only to managing authorities, to the beneficiaries, but also to the auditing authorities. It is important that everybody knows what is supposed to do and not to have, some cases, contradictory rules between so much funds. So simplification. But, and this goes to the RRF has a major contribution to give, I think, to the future of cohesion policy. In some cases, it demonstrates areas where we can think about going, but in some areas, in some cases, it clearly demonstrates areas where we should not go. And the simplification of that is brought in by the RRF, and namely the idea of having one single national program, is one of the areas where I think it's a huge mistake. This comes down to the question, is it the responsibility or not of the European institutions to make sure that the subsidiarity principle is respected at national level? I'm not saying that member states should create different levels of government. No, that's up to them, of course. But the question is it or is it not responsibility of the European institutions to make sure that when they are designing, managing this kind of funds that are provided by the European Union, should they not be the ones making sure that the subsidiarity principle is respected? That's a question. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this inspiring comment. So my next question would go to Mrs. Gower. However, maybe you should like to elaborate first, and then I will go to again to RRF instrument. Oh no.
Yeah, no, I can pick up on maybe the last exactly. point on the where not to go, and surprisingly, I will not disagree with you. I think when we say that. Now, when we say that one of the great benefits of the RRF is to have one single set of rules across sectors and therefore much more flexibility. Remember, I think the aggression of Ukraine by Russia, it was not complicated to all of a sudden make sure that you could add the necessary measures to the recovery and resilience plan to tackle the energy crisis that was unfolding. So the one single set of rules is one thing. It doesn't mean that it has to be negotiated centrally, and it doesn't mean that it has to exclude the regions. Why did it exclude the region? Why is the RF not including them sufficiently in the governance? For two reasons, I think. One, because it was drafted in the middle of the pandemic, and that the member states just thought, we just can't do it differently. It has to go fast, and the programming of the RF has been amazingly fast. But I think the second reason, which is much more important, is that because it came on top of cohesion. And as cohesion was already there, and was already there with the partnership principle, I think the need for making sure that all the regions would be on board in exactly the same way was slightly different. If we think about the future, where we shouldn't have different sets of rules, but one set of rules, obviously the issue of the regions, their involvement in the design, in the management and in the implementation will come back and will have to be done completely differently from the RF. I mentioned the three things to keep from the RF, which is reform, performance, one single set of rules. But certainly the thing to change from the RF for me is the involvement of the local players. So complete agreement on this one.
So you've started to elaborate a little bit, and you mentioned those areas where the RRF was very visible and very particularly efficient. But how can EU investment policies, including the cohesion policy now, respond to emerging challenges such as immigration crisis, for instance, or future enlargement, perhaps?
Thanks a lot. I think there's been a bit of in the last years and all the crises that we have gone through, there have always been talks about crisis instrument and cohesion policy, or crisis instrument and the RF. And I think what's clear for the RF was that it was born in a crisis, but it was not a crisis instrument. Like cohesion policy initially, or by design, is also not a crisis instrument. These are investment policy and long-term investment policy instruments which aim at increasing crisis preparedness, but not necessarily at reacting immediately like the Solidarity Fund, for example, would do. If you have floods, what you need to help the people on the ground immediately. Same for fires, same for the different crises we had.
This is an immediate, right, crisis,
exactly.
And we are talking about long term.
Absolutely. So the purpose of the RF and of cohesion policy is to look at what can we do long term to make sure that we are better prepared. Let me give you a few examples. If you look at the COVID pandemic, you had two ways of reacting. You could buy masks, which is typically the emergency measure, or you could strengthen by proper reforms and large investments your hospital networks, your primary care network, and that is precisely what cohesion policy does very well for the investment part, and what the RF has also done massively, both for the investment and for the reform, for example, of the health systems. So this is precisely where cohesion and the RF, for the time it existed, are really meant to look at the long-term design, the long-term preparedness, and where it has to be complemented by quick support to populations when they need that. But we shouldn't confuse the two, because otherwise you undermine the long-term visibility of the instrument. Thank you.
Thank you. And how about the Court of Auditors? How does the court see the flexibility of RRF instrument?
Hello? Yeah. Flexibility. Maybe just to go back to cohesion first, and then we can come back to the RF, because you specifically mentioned it. I think I think Celine said it. I mean, it's not by nature a crisis response policy area, but nonetheless it has been used on several occasions. And I think there is a risk there that it's used because there's funds there. And I think there's a risk that the primary objective suffers if funds are relocated elsewhere. So I think there has to be some, safeguard in place to make sure that the primary objective of the cohesion policy area is protected. I mean, we've seen, for instance, I mean, people talk, oh, the budget, it's not very flexible, but as has been mentioned already a couple of times, indeed, there was a lot of flexibility in relation to COVID. I mean, we actually did an audit in 2023 about adopting cohesion policy rules to respond to COVID. And there, for instance, we had the COVID Response and Investment Initiative and the second one, which obviously were a reaction to help member states. They changed the rules basically where member states could avail of 100% financing within a certain period of time. I think the issue is for us always with flexibility. We're completely in favour of flexibility, but ultimately we want to make sure that, again, come back to what I said earlier, that the financial interests of the EU are protected. So it's about a balance between being flexible and making sure that there's proper control of the funds. So if you look at what happened, what we've seen basically with the CRE, in theory again, and we talked about actions, and it was a very good initiative, I think, but it put pressure on the member states to spend money very quickly within a 1-year period. And what we find generally is when pressure is put on member states to spend money within a predefined period, we find errors. It's just a natural outcome because there's so much pressure on member states to identify projects and process them very quickly. So I think this had a huge impact, for instance, on our famous error rate for the last couple of years. A lot of it is actually down to these 100% financed projects, which I know are only temporary. But nonetheless, I think it was a response, but there was a side effect, if you like, maybe which wasn't envisaged at the time. We also have the cohesion actions for refugees. It was another initiative, and we have an audit which will be published soon in that regard. And I think also there was flexibility shown in terms of the top-up via the React EU, which was another over 50 billion euros. So there was a lot of actions taken. It's not as if the budget was just fixed and there wasn't any actions taken. But as I say, we have to make sure that there is an element of flexibility, with the flexibility that, proper controls are still maintained. You mentioned the RRF. I mean, I think we could have a whole day conference on the RRF on its own at the moment, because obviously it's been interlinked a little bit and mixed up with cohesion. I think because it's when we do audits now, we always seem to have a cohesion chamber, but every audit they do now there seems to involve some element of RRF funding as well. I mean, I don't dispute what Celine says in terms of some of the advantages of it, but honestly, from our point of view, the disbursement has gone to the member states, but we issued a report where half of the money is still in the coffers of the ministries in the member states, so it hasn't got down to the regions or the beneficiaries, or the investment hasn't been repaid, let's say. So I think there are issues in that. Our big issue with the RRF compared to, cohesion, I mean, cohesion, people say it's very cumbersome, it's cost-based, fair enough. But I mean, regardless of the new MFF and the delivery mechanism, for us what's really important is, whether it's linked to reforms is irrelevant for us. What matters to us is that there is a traceability for the funds, that we can follow the money and see where it's actually spent. And by doing that, we can ensure that the Commission, is held accountable for the use of the funds. Because for us at the moment, there's a huge gap in terms of traceability and accountability. So we would have some issues in terms of the RF being this silver bullet which addresses all the issues that we face at the moment. So I suppose I'm saying that there is flexibility there. I mean, even in terms of the RF, we have visited many member states, and it was sold as a sort of very non-bureaucratic, exercise that would happen, and it seems to have been the opposite. The negotiation of the plans in the first place, as we've seen, took an awful long time, and the revisions of the plans also are very complicated and difficult. It's not a simple thing of just going with new measures. I mean, it really takes some time and investment at the cost of the member states, and this is the feedback that we have been given. So I think it's important to get the flexibility is commensurate with both the efforts, administrative burden on the member states, and also the control to ensure that the funds are spent properly. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, Mrs. Christophidou, at the heart of the current political debate is the strengthening of the single market, European single market. So, can cohesion policy somehow contribute more to achieving this goal, to bring Europe closer?
If Vice President Fito were here, he would have said, la risposta è sì. The answer is yes. But for better or for worse, I'm not a politician. So normally I don't have this privilege of going a bit off script and coming back. But if the politicians allow me for a second to use their privilege, if they lend me the privilege, I would like to say that the most, I would say, clear example of a country, a success story of cohesion that moved from net beneficiary to being on the side of the payers, let's call it, is actually Ireland. And the colleagues, the Irish colleagues tell me, and I find this so telling, that they are still what we call friends of cohesion, supporters of cohesion, because they don't have the narrow-minded view that once I profited from something, now nobody else should. They know that it's the right thing to do, the smart thing to do, and that they will also continue profiting from the spillovers of a cohesive Europe, and therefore they remain friends of cohesion. I think this tells a story in itself. So to come now to your question and become an official again, I will remind us, of course, of the architect of the single market, Jacques Delors, and Enrico Letta is nowadays reminding us of the legacy of Jacques Delors regularly, and thank God. Jacques Delors said that an effective, a successful single market always will need a strong cohesion policy. And he did add that every widening and deepening of Europe must be accompanied by a reinforced cohesion policy. This is word to the wise also, because we're talking about future enlargements, so this needs to be taken into account. It cannot be seen disconnected. So yes, cohesion policy, where do I start from? When I started working in the Commission and I was dealing with Poland and the Baltic states, we were designing, even before accession, 2002, we were designing Rail Baltica and Via Baltica. What was this? It was about connecting the Baltic states to Poland, to Berlin, to Brussels. So the single market at its best. If you don't start with connectivity, you can't have a single market. If you don't continue with all the services that are needed in every part of Europe, you can't have single market. I want to come to what the President of the Court of Auditors said, and I follow him in his logic from A to Z. What have we been doing with cohesion policy, and not only at national, but at regional and local level? We have been building institutions, administrative capacity. It is about what? This is about democracy, of course, transparency, about rule of law, about managing the funds in the most transparent way, about consulting society in all its forms. So all this has been built through cohesion policy, and any future enlargement will need the same or a similar model of building these institutions in order to ensure that the taxpayers' money goes to the right place, is spent well, there is traceability, like the President of the Court of Auditors is looking for. Then it's infrastructure, is a skilled workforce, is research, it's business environment. Enrico Letta spoke a lot about the right to stay, and Vice President Fito today said you need a reason to stay. And the President of the Committee of the Regions reminded us that cohesion is not a charity policy, and I thank him for that. Now, what is all this about? You need to make sure that the services that are needed in each place, whether this is health, whether this is education, accessibility, these are maintained through cohesion policy so that people have a reason to stay. And it's an illusion to think that, well, the brain drain, well, it's not a problem if somebody who is very smart and talented and innovative and has ideas leaves the eastern part of Poland and moves to Denmark, it's fine, it's still Europe. I think this is a bit of a naive way of looking at it, because actually he may move out of Europe and go to other places of the world. Once you decide that where you were born doesn't give you a future anymore, the decision to go 100 kilometers away or 2,000 kilometers away is not that big anymore. So we end up losing the talent, not to the better parts, the richer parts of Europe, which was basically initially happening, but outside Europe. So to keep all this, one needs to create the conditions for people to stay, and the single market needs to work, and cohesion policy is doing this at its core and will continue doing this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we still have 30 minutes until the end of this session, this panel, so I will just ask you to be quite brief. And now I would like to turn to Mrs. Sukova and ask about the challenges that still face European Union. We're talking about migration pressure. We're talking about ongoing war in Ukraine, the Russian aggression, energy transition, enlargement possibly. So these aspects have all, of course, a social dimension. So how can a cohesion policy address them?
Thank you very much for putting the question like that, but I think that we miss one very important challenge, and that's the demographic challenge. Because the Marshal of the Sejma, I'll take his speech one by one, probably one day, because it was really very good, very rich and inspiring, but he also referred to the loss of human capital on the labor market. By the end of 2030, we'll have almost 5 million people less on the labor market. So this puts an additional pressure on few sides. We have labor and skill shortages which are increasing, and we cannot go for competitiveness if we don't have the labor force and the skilled labor force. On the other hand, the aging population puts pressure on our public finances. It puts pressure on services, social services, because in the next few years we will need more than 1.6 million additional long-term care workers by 2050 in Europe. So it means that we definitely need to rethink the way we address these challenges. The demographic challenge is really vital, and everybody knows we cannot have a very quick solution for that. We cannot produce or clone people. So on the one hand, we will have a solution from migration when it's regular, when it's regularized, when it's orderly and lawful, but we also will have the possibility, the need to ensure the services that Temis was just talking about, that people need services in order to be able to live in a place, to live in a region or community, and this is something which also needs people. You know, we're always ending up with needs of people. I also want to mention that in the 242 NUTS 2 regions in Europe, 82 face loss of talent in essential services. So these are regions that are risking being unattractive. And we are talking about cohesion policy that will reduce differences among regions, economic, social, and territorial development, that will keep regions alive and thriving. But when we have depopulation ahead of us, we have to really rethink our mechanisms and our measures. And all the references to migration, to energy transition, I always want to say that energy transition or any transition is possible, acceptable for the population only if it's fair and just. And if it really thinks, I'm quoting again the Marshal, that we have to think about the impact of the final beneficiaries, of the final users of our policy, to be sure that this is taken up by Europeans and doesn't put democracy under question. the feeling that decisions are taken in Brussels for a limited number of Europeans, and there are Europeans totally forgotten, this feeling is very dangerous for democracy. We have to think that if there is a threat for somebody, we should clearly take action to mitigate or take away the threat. And I really believe that there are ways and there are mechanisms that can be mobilized for that. We have a lot of things to learn from how to do our cohesion policy in the future, how to make sure that we do encourage people, we do encourage talents to stay, to work in Europe. We attract talents from outside, but we take care for everyone, and no one should be left behind is a very good slogan for all the transitions that we live through. And also, our crisis will not stop. It is clear, we have crisis regularly. We are living in a crisis mode. But our strength is that we can mobilize efforts and resources to address the crisis. And I think that the eternal question is how to balance the long-term nature of cohesion policy with the crises that come up, and we have to mobilize cohesion policy. And I can tell you that one of the amendments of CRE Plus was done in 4 days of the Common Provisions Regulation. So we are reactive, but also we have to think about in-bed flexibility, which will allow, without the intervention of a commission or an amendment to regulations, member states to act in cases of crisis, disasters, whatever. So now we'll see the restore amendment to ESF and ERDF regulations, how this will be helping up member states and regions which were affected by natural disasters last year. And I think one of the key considerations and thinking about in the future setup is indeed how to balance long-term and flexibility. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And it's no coincidence that we just discussed the social dimension of cohesion policy, because now we will be talking about competitiveness. In his last report, Mario Draghi put this question as a central aspect, a key goal of European Union. So my question goes to Mr. Szyszko now. How to reconcile, is it even possible to reconcile those apparently opposite goals of the cohesion policy and competitiveness? How can you marry both targets?
So I'm one of the politicians here, so I feel fully allowed not to answer your question, but I'll try anyway. I've said that cohesion needs to evolve before, and I use the word evolve because in my or our judgment, cohesion is one of the things that work. They need to be improved, but they don't need a revolution. However, the European Union, and it's thinking about the investment strategy, let me be as clear as I can, needs a change in paradigm in many, many ways. And today, during the speeches of the Marshal, of the Minister, of many other speeches over here during the conference, Poland comes to the table with ideas, with a vision, with proposals that we want to inspire with and that we want to discuss with you, and then in the coming months with other partners in Europe. And let me reiterate some of those proposals that we believe would change the paradigm, but also that would be bold and ensure competitiveness. Speaking about competitiveness, one of the lowest hanging fruits how to support competitiveness is to allow spending European funding to support the European defense industry. We have the industry, we have great European companies saying that they can produce, they can build European competitiveness in that sector, but there aren't enough orders. There isn't enough demand. We can support that demand with European funding. We can do it. It's not only a Poland thing, it's a thing that would support economies in numerous member states, including Germany, for example. It's a pan-European goal and a priority, one of the priorities, security, that unfortunately so in the last couple of years has become more timely and more pressing than anyone ever wanted. And here is an option to address it with European funds. Another area that has been mentioned here is that our green policies need to be logical, not ideological. Logical, I fully agree, and nobody in Poland right now would ever undermine the need to go climate neutral. I mean, everyone agrees on that. The thing that we need to think about is how we do it, and the methods we go by to achieve this. In this respect, we are all in using both national and European funds, investing in offshore wind farms, in renewable energy sources, subsidizing the people with their transition from coal, which is the most pressing and polluting energy source in the country, to other means. However, what we see, people reject the green transition when it's done with a stick rather than a carrot. In that sense, we do not support, for example, taxing the owners of cars in Poland, CO2 emitting cars in Poland, in a situation where 40% of the Polish population is living in transport exclusion, away from any train stations or access to other public transport. What we are saying is the goal of being net zero needs to be being competitive, and that's the goal for Poland's net zero strike, and that's why we are investing in offshore wind farms, and that's how we are explaining it to people. And when we say it this way, and when we behave this way, and we introduce policies in this way, it's fully supported and fully understood. We're also investing nuclear, and we see this as part of our energy transition, and we are very open, and we would like the debate on a more privileged treatment of nuclear in the green taxonomy on the European level as well. Another thing that we have said over here, we cannot wait until 2027, and I'm very glad that this has been reflected in speeches from numerous speakers today. We have to act now. We have to be ambitious and bold about midterm review. Some of the ideas, such as the ones related to security, yes, they will need a change in paradigm, they will need legal changes. We can do this sooner than we would have all anticipated. Another aspect or another idea that we have thrown in over here relates exactly to the linking of the RRF and cohesion, or to the future of the RRF and cohesion. We are very open, and I mean in full agreement with you over here. Looking at how reforms and investments work in the RRF, they work very well. And I mean, if something works well, then we probably need to look for ways to keep it and to incorporate it in other policies. One thing that we are saying is that we see the more streamlined, sometimes in easier regional management of funds, or in the cohesion model that we are using, and the link of reforms and investments, were to be applied to cohesion, would indeed need to be not done at the cost of the regional management of cohesion, and we think that it's possible. We think also that the reforms in the RRF, being in the Polish case, I think it's 56 reforms that we have right now. We are open to continuing that model, but perhaps it would be also wiser for the future to have a smaller number of more horizontal, more structural reforms that would also make it easier to explain the purpose to the general public, to make it understandable. So in here we are pretty much fully aligned, open to a discussion and to improve a model that works. But what we also see is that the regional management of investments and the sort of ceding of the decision-making regarding investments to the regional governors is one of the most important fundamentals for building the support for the European Union in countries like Poland. And put it very, very straightforward, the fact that regional governors have a say in the decision-making process of where the EU investments from their funding go in their region also gives a direct incentive to share the good message about the European Union to the smallest towns and smallest villages that probably wouldn't have received that message otherwise, if not from that regional governor. So it often is a really political or social argument of how to solidify and cement the support for the European Union. That's something that the EU investments give us definitely. Here are some of the ideas that we want to discuss in the future, and we wanted to open with this conference. We do think that And I really believe that in order to be competitive, Europe, yes, needs to ameliorate what's already working, but also needs to honestly evaluate what didn't go as well as we expected in the past, and also look for ways to perhaps often mobilize new funds and see how we can not only invest better, but invest more in our, as the Marshal said, security and well-being.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister. Security Europe, indeed, this is the slogan of Polish presidency. And quickly, as we need to wrap up, and you all are hungry and looking for the lunch break, we understand that we have 15 minutes and we have 7 speakers here. So if I may ask you just to briefly try to use 2 minutes of your time and tell us, how do you see the cohesion policy being able to contribute to European security more? And we have different perspectives. We can talk military, we can talk economic or energy. I will not indicate people, just please take your floor. I would like to start.
Thank you. On the 30 seconds on the last discussion on the issue of linking investments to reforms, I think that member states and regions that have been working on cohesion policy for decades are not worried so much on how to link investments to reforms, because we've been doing this all this time. When you tell people that they will get funding for waste treatment plants, subject to them committing to implementing the environmental acquis, this is a reform. We were calling it conditionality, but we're talking about the same thing. When you tell the railways to unbundle their system so that you give funding, it's again a reform. I think the question that we will have in the coming months, and we will all work together to figure it out, will be how to be able to attribute the absence of a reform, the penalty for the absence of a reform to the right level, so that you don't have a level that is penalized for a reform that another level has not implemented. This will be, I think, the tricky question, but altogether, if we put our brains, I'm sure we will figure it out. On the security Europe, I think, well, if we look at economic security, this is what we've been doing by supporting a broad base of industrial fabric throughout the regions of Europe, and we will continue doing that, investing in research, in advanced technologies, in green energy, biotechnology, smart manufacturing. So these are areas where we have already invested, and we should do more for the economic security aspect. There's the energy security aspect. Only currently we are investing 45 billion of EU funds only, and then you have to always add the national co-financing for the energy transition. So this is massive. Then one can have a discussion on defense. There are things that the cohesion policy does already in terms of industries that invest in dual use. So it's in the landscape of cohesion policy also. I stop here because we have no lot of time. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, and I try to be very brief, but this gives me the opportunity to react on what the President said about, and I totally agree, we need to distinguish between goals and measures. What I not agree with is that cohesion is the goal and competitiveness is a measure to reach that goal. You quoted Article 174. I quote Article 173. The Union and the Member States shall ensure that the conditions necessary for the competitiveness of the Union's industry exist. For me, it's also a goal. And I would think it's not either or, but it's both together, next to other goals that are stated in the treaty. And therefore, in the ideal world, or let's say in a perfect Europe, the strengthening of competitiveness must promote the cohesion and vice versa. A stronger cohesion can also promote competitiveness. And altogether, that makes Europe strong. And this is the best resilience and security strategy. And last remark, I wish my Polish friends and colleagues all the best for the presidency. I think the motto you've chosen is well chosen. Thank you.
So a few words also from my side. I think security is like one of these many important European challenges that you have described and that we have discussed here. And the question is, what is the answer, and does cohesion policy belong to the answer? And I think it really does. And the compass that was published yesterday and referred to by a number of speakers illustrates that very, very clearly. I think for these big challenges, we have to have a European answer, because together we are much stronger, because isolated, even the biggest of us are very, very small in member states. So we need a common answer. That common answer for some of the things have to be done at centralized EU level, because no member state and no region can give an answer. Take energy security, you need cross-border infrastructure for doing cross-border investment. Cohesion policy is just not the right tool. The RF is not the right tool and was also not the right tool. So you need a cross-border instrument that is at the EU budget level. The same for some of the regulation for the single market. You need to have one single set of rules across the EU, otherwise it doesn't work. But the implementation of the policies that will allow to meet these challenges is very, very often national and regional. Again, come back to energy security. The implementation requires, for example, energy efficiency. And to do energy efficiency, the investments are very local. So they are regional, they are not at the level of the EU. They can be supported by the EU budget, they have to be supported by cohesion policy, but they shouldn't be defined and determined at the EU level. And the same will go for the rollout of renewables that will require some national regulation as well. So you have these different layers that have to work and be integrated together, and the cohesion policy has this fundamental role to play to be the national and regional and local implementation of the answers we are giving to bigger challenges and to European challenges. Thank you.
Well, I think cohesion policy already invests and provides for a broad range of aspects concerning security. Some of them were already mentioned here. The economic security. I would like to add the climate security. That is more and more important. The fact that cohesion policy provides funds for investments to tackle the consequences of climate change, that's a way to provide security, and of course, energy security. Finally, Mr. Secretary of State, I totally agree with you. Let me phrase it another way. What concerns me is not the importance and the proeminence that competitiveness has in some speeches. What concerns me is the lack of reference to cohesion in those same speeches. Thank you.
Okay, well, for us, I mean, we basically just wait and see what the policymakers decide, and then we follow the implementation, so it's quite easy for us in that regard. But I think it's very important. I mean, the Polish priorities for the presidency, security is one of the main priorities, and all the elements that were mentioned, energy, security, climate, military. So I think, I mean, what just taking off the auditor's hat, I think, and just thinking, I mean, we see this as needing a sort of a holistic approach. Maybe, as Celine said, different layers. Some of it can be done at the local level. I mean, as we said, there's been very good argumentation here for place-based interventions in certain areas. But for instance, one area where we looked at, I mean, we looked at the Repower EU when it was being negotiated. And there we didn't really see the value of splitting a very limited amount of money across all the member states, when maybe in that particular case it may have been better to focus on big strategic projects which may have delivered more value. And I think we will, you know, this is also the case probably for military mobility. We have to think about it in a different way. Maybe we have a report which will be issued next week on military mobility, which will cover some of these aspects, I think. So just not to finish on security, I'm very happy that the Commissioner or the Director General mentioned that Ireland wasn't in favour of pulling up the ladder when it got to a certain level. And I think this is one of the big things we should be thankful for in the EU, is the solidarity between member states. I mean, I think Ireland benefited greatly from it during the Brexit negotiations, and I think it's only fair that they are also, you know, show solidarity with the other member states. And to finalise with the RRF, maybe, I mean, because it was mentioned a couple of times, I mean, there is now an opportunity with the midterm review of the 21-27 to see what will happen. I mean, the take-up for the 21-27 cohesion funds is extremely low. And I think this is in fact linked in some way to the RRF as well. There's competing funds there, and member states are more likely to take up the RRF for investments when they're being 100% financed, rather than under the cohesion where there's an element of co-financing. And for us as auditors, we would always see that an element of co-financing is a good protection to make sure that the best projects are being selected. Thank you.
Thank you.
If I may have a word, I'll be very short. I hope I'm not breaking the rules of timing. I think that security has also a very personal dimension. And security goes together with preparedness. Your personal preparedness to be ready to learn throughout your life, to have the chances to learn throughout your life and be upskilled and reskilled so that you're contributing to economic growth. It also goes through the inclusivity, because social inclusion is a very important precondition for personal security, for societal security, but also for keeping justice and peace. And we don't want to jeopardize and put at risk our internal EU security by not taking account of people that are Europeans. And I can tell you that a majority, not a majority, but quite a number of people in the European Union have special needs, and they have to be catered for. So security has a very personalized dimension, which we should obviously always take into account. I don't want to elaborate more because I'm aware of the timing limitations, but thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I'll be very short as well. Fully agree that security has many dimensions and different priorities across Europe, depending on where we look and where we ask. That's very evident. Perhaps in that respect, it would be a good idea for the future of European funds to agree on a portfolio of priorities, or that we do realize and that we pursue across the European Union, that member states or even regions could choose from to see what fits their needs in the best possible way, in order to make those, you know, European funds as agile, flexible as they can. On the cohesion funds and the uptake, we know it's difficult. We also know that there are challenges in the RRF, especially in the loan part. There are many corners and many places in the room that we have to look at to find the best solutions and to solve the problems. In my final words, I would like to thank you all for coming to Krakow and making it to Poland. It's a pleasure to us to host you here and to have this discussion at home. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. And that concludes our panel. Thank you very much for your insights, for your valuable experience, and for the discussion. So I wish you a very good stay in Krakow, our beautiful city, and all the best for the future. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Bardzo Państwu dziękujemy za wciągające.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for this attractive discussion. We'd like to thank Anna Kalczyńska of TVP World for moderation. In a moment, lunch. It will last until to 15, catering for participants. Level 1, special guests, second floor, and then parallel sessions along the program that you can see on the screen. Territorial accessibility and mobility, that's S2, S3A, climate neutrality, challenges for competitiveness and growth. S3B, social dimension of the cohesion policy and its transformation. S4A, economic transition, and S4B, digital transition. Importantly, we will not finish in the Congress Center. If you want to see the city, look for people with the presidency logo by the Museum of the Underground Market in Sukiennice, by St. Mary's Church that's visiting the old city, and if you want to visit Kazimierz by the Congress Center, all the guides will at the end bring you to dinner to Stara Zajezdnia. Please remember to take your invitation that you received collecting your IDs. At the end, please remember to leave your headsets at the door. At the door where you will have parallel sessions, you will be able to collect your headset for another room. Thank you very much for the official part. Enjoy the day, enjoy the food, plenty of smile. See you later, see you tomorrow.